All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our January 13th work session agenda. Hope everyone is off to a good start this year, and thanks again for joining us, those here in the room and those on live stream. So we'll begin with our first item on the agenda, or second item, actually, the roll call. So,
Mayor
City Clerk
Garicano,
here.
Councilmember Roast, Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell, Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Galani, Councilmember Preston,
Here.
Councilmember Mabry,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rainbow,
Here.
Councilmember Crayons,
Here.
Councilmember Albers.
Here. Thank you. Well, under mayor's comments and announcements, item number 3 on the agenda, we do have our legislative consultant, Jake Silverman, who is going to be joining us here. I did just find out that he is running a little late, so if there's no objection from anyone here on the council, we will entertain that when he arrives. We'll fit that into the agenda, so we'll certainly look for that. So seeing no objection, we'll do that. I do not have any other comments or announcements, so we'll move into for information with several items with reports that have been provided. And at this point, I'll see if there are any questions from the council regarding any of the for information items. See any at this time, so we can certainly open it up before we close out our work session under miscellaneous, if anybody has anything that comes up or any agenda items that are scheduled for later this evening. So with that, we'll move into the for action section A. Oh, we do have a question or a comment?
No, we thought you skipped over for action.
Okay, so we're gonna move into for action. Now is the time. We'll get in there. A, under city council, we have the first item, the latitude north 38. So I'll ask Director Vunich to go ahead and introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, as you know, TB Realty and Benton Homes filed an appeal to a decision made by the city's Planning and Zoning Commission relative to a rezoning request and application of an overlay district. In the letter that's been prepared for tonight's discussion, the department notes that since that appeal had been filed, the city council has requested or engaged in a number of steps to further understand the project, its components, the concerns of the residents in the vicinity, and others. Those items include a draft site-specific ordinance, which is an attachment to the letter prepared for tonight's discussion. Several cost comparisons that were developed initially starting with McBride Homes proposal, which was on the north side of Crestview Drive, east of Etherton Road. A cooperation agreement relative to the discussions relating to Main Street, its construction, the dedication of land, and the release of rights to Crestview Drive. And then the engagement of an appraiser that was requested by our city administrator to better understand the cost associated with that extraordinary dedication that the development entities are proposing to ensure that Main Street has adequate right-of-way for the future as well as the present. And then finally, the city council has also authorized the development of a number of supporting materials relative to, again, Main Street. The department has a very brief presentation relative to this particular item because I know there's a lot of comments from our city council that have been delayed over the course of several postponements of late. The department would just note that before the Planning and Zoning Commission, it did support the project. The project from the standpoint of a type of unit, is allowable in the town center area and this particular land use category from the regulating plan, neighborhood general. In fact, in the letter prepared by the department, it does note that when the town center update team was reviewing this particular area, primarily the intersection of Etherton Road and proposed Main Street extension, they actually changed the designation from downtown district to neighborhood general district, acknowledging that from the standpoint of the development pattern that had occurred, primarily Canterbury and Main Street crossing, downtown district uses would not be appropriate at that intersection. The density of the development meets the range. We've talked, it's at the highest end of that range, but it is within the range established by, again, the neighborhood general district. The development's design in terms of utility and stormwater improvements were not favorably reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, but do comply with city codes and partner agencies, principally the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. The development's planned roadway improvements to Etherton Road are to mirror those that were required as part of Main Street crossing. So again, the streetscape of our town center plan with on-street parking included. In terms of Main Street, that has been the focus of our discussion because obviously it's a major initiative of the city over the past 10 plus years. And without Main Street, this particular project cannot proceed forward. The developer has noted it is their intent to complete streetscape improvements from the back of curb of Main Street onto their property, which includes all of the sidewalks, street trees, street lights, street signs, and other improvements. They have agreed to dedicate up to 40 feet in width of their project area for Main Street. And they have agreed to provide an escrow for the extension of Main Street. That amount is detailed later. The development design through discussions, particularly here at City Council, has improved regarding screening, green space, and walkability. And again, from the department's perspective, it supported it at the Planning and Zoning Commission based upon the town center plan, our zoning ordinance, and related codes, and other items that have been added through the process of public comment and city council participation. The last item the department would identify is the cooperation agreement, and that has been prepared primarily by our city attorney, John Young, with reviews by the city administrator and Department of Planning. The intent of that cooperation agreement was to try to put some parameters on how Main Street would be dedicated relative to this project, how the release of rights to Crestview Drive would be granted by the owners of these properties to development entities, and more importantly, the breakdown in terms of what the development entities would pay and what the city of Wildwood would credit. And to that end, there are a number of items that have been provided. Our former assistant city engineer, Dan Ron, when we were working with McBride Homes, created a chart, and that chart was included in the letter that you received from the department. And it broke down or divided into the relative cost for each section. The McBride Homes, the remaining parcel on the north side of Crestview Drive that McBride Homes did not have under contract, the Village Green, and in this case, it's referenced as south of Crestview, which is approximately 760 feet of frontage. And that is this project today. The cooperation agreement has been reviewed by the development entities. There have been comments back and forth. But again, what you have before you tonight is the presentation of that cooperation agreement from the efforts of our city administrator, city attorney, and Department of Planning. I know that there are a number of questions. I know that in the draft attachment B, there have been comments made about certain exhibits that are referenced by the development entity's attorney. Those exhibits were not provided under the recommendation from our legal counsel. And so from that perspective, there are a few things that are not available to you tonight for consideration. But again, remember, attachment B are draft conditions. They are not legislation. And depending on the outcome of the appeal process that's before you tonight as city council, certainly those things can be, those attachment B conditions can be modified, addressed, or whatever is the direction the department receives. In conclusion, the department has, with the assistance of the city administrator and city attorney, collectively put together all of the items that the city council has been discussing over the past 4 to 5 months and is seeking direction tonight from the city council. There is an appeal before you. The appeal is in a formal process contained in our zoning ordinance. And there are options that have been identified by our city attorney that I will let him address. But certainly at this stage, the department is seeking direction one way or another. It believes it has provided you the information necessary to reach a conclusion on the appeal. But certainly if the department is mistaken in that regard, it will do everything it can to provide the information that each of the individual members of city council needs to proceed forward. And with that, I'll defer to Mr. Young if he has anything he'd like to add in this regard, or Mr. Lee. And then I'll be available for questions as well as the Director of Public Works, our city administrator, and city attorney. Thank you.
Just as a reminder to the council, you do currently have pending before you a motion to prepare legislation that has not been acted upon. And that would be the next step here at the work session, to have legislation presented to you at the council meeting. Now, should that motion fail, your options are as follows. You can reverse the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the development as was presented at the Planning and Zoning Commission. You can come up with an alternative approval if you so desire, or vote to present at the regular meeting an affirmation of the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial of the proposed rezoning.
So in summary, I think he's described 3 options for your consideration tonight. Thank you.
All right, does the city administrator, do you have anything at this point to add, or?
Nothing tonight, other than we're happy to have the cooperation agreement up for debate at tonight's meeting, and then it would go back to, if I'm correct, John, it would go back to the regular session, back to that appeal process tonight, if it's chosen upon the council.
Correct. The motion pending is to prepare the legislation, which would come before you in February.
Okay, so I'm going to ask to see if we have any council members with anything that they wish to speak to with regards to this item here. If you could raise your hand. Okay, we've got a couple of hands up. We'll start with Councilmember Mabry, Kranz, Ottenberg, and Marshall. So Councilmember Mabry. Oh, and all right, let me make sure we've got everybody down here. We've got a few hands up. Okay, Sid Mabry, Kranz, Ottenberg, and now Albers, Edens. Did I leave Marshall out? You know where you kind of fit in between there, or? Okay, thank you. I want to be as fair as possible. Okay, and McCutcheon. All right, so let's start with Councilmember Mabry. Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Some
quarter.
things just never change, huh?
I'm glad to go first as the official dumb question asker to lead off. I have a lot of questions and they're even written down. I've heard that now these exhibits A, B, C, D are 1, 2, 3, I think like A, B, C, they are in the city's possession. That's good news. Don't need to get in the weeds, it sounds like, on what the contents of those are, though they are very important to the decision of an action, how strong they are, what they describe they're providing for. The action you're looking for, though, is a motion to finally start the process, feeling like that between what the city has and the council hasn't seen yet, and what the council knows, and predicated on what the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended a couple of times, that we ought to be at a point where we are well justified in making a motion to bust a move and start the process. And there's an appeal that we're supposed to wait for the results of before we start anything new, official, or the results of our motion will have an impact on the results of that appeal. Any help with that?
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Councilmember, the appeal is actually before the city council at the moment. So you've held a public hearing on that appealed item. So really at this point, what we're looking for is direction on how you'd like to vote as a resolution of that appealed item, whether it is to affirm the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation of denial of the proposed rezoning, or to move forward with either what is being proposed to you tonight, which is a proposed approval with modifications from what was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. And with that, what you just said, we see a bunch of blue stuff and a bunch of the petitioner's red counters. But we don't have to approve the red counters. We only have to move that we're far enough along that we feel that it's if it's timely to either agree with the denial that Planning and Zoning's put together. And it's untoward for me to say which way I'm gonna side with that. But the motion would be to decide, basically, see that there's enough blue and red petitioner counters to say we should move ahead and get prepared to go. And that is going to represent a vote against the council's recommendation for rejection because we want to proceed. Or the other is we're still too far apart. We disagree with too many of the counters from the petitioner's red comments that we're not in a position to be willing to be confident to counteract the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial. Is that about as firm as I can understand it?
Well, in terms of the blue and red, there's a recommendation from the department and the city team. And that's the recommendation you have before you. So that was directed by the council to prepare. The additional comments that were presented in different color were just to let you know what the developer's responses to those conditions were. You can choose to accept them as presented by the department. You can choose to modify them based upon the comments provided by the developer and their team. So you can further modify if you'd like, or you can just say, we're not going to approve this under any circumstances anyway. So really there's three options, which is to approve, effectively approve it as presented, provide modifications and approve it, or affirm the decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. That's clear.
Right, Councilmember Kranz is next.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. Thank you for asking.
I'm going to ask you some questions and then I'm going to make a motion. It's my understanding that Latitude N38 is refusing to pay its share of the construction costs for Main Street. You advised in your report the amount is $498,000. Is that true?
Yes.
And how did you arrive at that figure?
So there's been a lot of discussion between the development entities and the city about cost relative to their component, their section of Main Street. The department can only depend on a source that it knows, and that source was our Department of Public Works via then our assistant city engineer. That is the number I'm using because that is, to me, the most reliable source I have at this time. It's not necessarily distrust of the development entities, but I work closely with the assistant city engineer to understand unit cost, the dimensions, the requirements, and how all of that, when put together, created that number. So to me, it's about $500,000 of obligation.
Okay. When Payne Family Homes built the Main Street Crossing subdivision, it paid $1 million for Main Street construction. Can you tell me how that figure, how did you arrive at that figure?
Primarily through the development agreement that was established between Payne Family Homes and the city of Wildwood. As part of that development agreement, there was an obligation of Payne Family Homes to build a certain portion of Main Street through the development, through their development site. We asked Payne Family Homes to do more, to build it from the edge of their development site west to Route 109. To accomplish that, we credited the traffic generation assessment fee and also agreed to give them whatever traffic generation assessment fee we would collect as the city for the two outlots, the commercial outlots.
Okay. Now, McBride had a plan to build across the street from Latitude N38. However, that plan was withdrawn. You advised if the plan had moved forward, McBride was on the hook for $650,000 with respect to the Main Street construction cost.
That's correct. The major difference between McBride Homes and Latitude North 38 is McBride Homes' dedication was only 10 feet versus 40 feet. And that kind of has created that component of the cooperation agreement.
You advised that Latitude N38's position is that the city of Wildwood should pay Latitude N38's construction costs for Main Street, and that further negotiations ended with this firm demand. Is that true?
I believe that to be the case because the request for the extraordinary dedication and subsidizing not only construction of a portion of the Main Street along their frontage and others was the fact that over the years, there has been a consistent goal to extend Main Street from its current terminus, either at Etherton Road or here in front of City Hall. And the Economic Development Committee over the years, not necessarily recently, has identified that as a priority project. So again, following our master plan, strategic plan, our capital improvements program under the 5-year timeframe, the departments, I believe, thought it was inappropriate to try to make something work for Main Street.
Okay. Therefore, I will not support taxpayers of Wildwood paying Latitude N38 share for the cost of Main Street, which amounts to almost $500,000. Latitude N38 should be treated the same as past developers and not be an exception. This sets a bad precedent and sends the wrong message to developers. I'm going to make a motion that Latitude N38 is required to pay a sum of $498,000, which it owes and obligated to pay for its share of the construction costs for Main Street in this proposal. That's my motion.
Can you hold a moment here? I'm going to just ask the city attorney because he did mention before, we still have that motion that the council had made. So, that might not be appropriate unless it's an amendment, but I'll ask the city attorney to clarify that.
And just so I'm clear, in assisting and formulating this, is the intent here that the dollar amount, the $498,000,
$98,000.
is that, is the suggestion to remove all of the credits that are set forth in the cooperative agreement?
That, I believe, is a net amount. It includes the credits and everything, correct, Joe?
No, sir, it does not include the credits. It's the overall cost.
Okay.
I did not take into account any credits at this stage.
What credit are you talking about?
There is a traffic generation assessment fee that will be applied to each of the parking spaces associated with the 53 units. We've estimated it at $157,000. That would be a credit toward the construction of the Main Street. But I did not take that into account because, again, that is a council action, but it is a component of the cooperation agreement.
So what would your recommendation be?
If we were consistent with Main Street Crossing, we would credit the TGA like we did for
Okay.
Payne Family Homes. But other than that, there were no other payments or credits to. Payne
Well,
Family Homes.
I'm okay with that credit. So why don't we subtract that 158 from the 498, and I'll modify my motion. Is that fair?
Well, it's certainly consistent with what we did with.
I want to be
Payne Family-
consistent, Joe.
And Payne Family Homes was successful in developing 104 single-family
Okay.
detached dwellings on individual lots and created a major section of Main Street.
What is that net amount?
Roughly, I would say it's about $340,000.
Is it 340?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. But you want to deal with the first motion?
Well, there's a motion on the floor, so if you're going to make any kind of motion, it has to be an amendment to the. current
Okay.
motion.
I'm not
That's
sure what,
Robert's rules.
I'm confused about this motion on the floor.
Sure, well, there was a motion made several months ago to
Several months
prepare
ago.
legislation, and that's been postponed. So what we're debating right now is actually that motion to prepare the legislation. Now, what you're suggesting, I believe, can be treated as a motion to
To help
amend.
prepare that motion.
Right.
I thought we're meeting here to get prepared for it. Are you
Correct.
saying a motion has been made already on this?
Yes,
But not voted,
I'm,
but not
confused.
voted.
yeah, it wasn't acted upon, it was postponed.
oh, okay.
It was-
So
So read
that-
the motion so we can vote on it then.
Well, the motion was to prepare legislation. So, which is what's to be presented at the regular council meeting. So what we can do tonight, what I believe would be appropriate in terms of so your motion is consistent with an amendment to the motion to prepare legislation, but the motion to prepare legislation would be amended to be consistent with that presented by the
You fix it. But
Well,
I'll amend the motion when you tell me when to.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what the intent is here. So in terms of the reduction, I think we're looking at an amendment to what's been presented as a development agreement. And I'm just not sure where the numbers are coming in or out.
Well, from the department's perspective, the traffic generation assessment fee credit is contained in the site-specific ordinance. We grant that as part of the action establishing the requirement. In terms of how much they pay, the current condition basically says they construct their 1/2 of a 70-foot right-of-way. And in response to that, that's where the attorney representing the development entity said, we can't accept that.
They do not want to pay their portion of Main Street. And I want them to pay it. So
Paid or
let's fix it here.
We
Yeah.
need to kill the existing motion because I think there's a lot of people that want to add exceptions to the package.
Hold on just a moment here. Let the city administrator.
Make sure I'm understanding when we say the cost of Main Street, does that mean pay a dollar amount or actually construct that portion?
So it's an interesting question because obviously draft conditions preclude access to Etherton Road until such time that Etherton Road's improved. So their only access for development purposes is Main Street. So there has to be some construction to accommodate development. And so from that perspective, I would normally say we would collect that $340,000 via special escrow and hold it until such time we could build the entire section. But in this case, they need access, and access is Main Street at this stage.
Okay, 'Cause right now we have them agreeing to pay $125,000 contribution for Main Street crossing with the credit for the TGA
And the appraisal
and the
amount.
appraisal of the additional land. So are we changing that 125 to that larger number?
I think actually the cooperation agreement may not be necessary if we proceed forward with Councilmember Cran's direction.
Okay,
Because I believe what he is saying is build the road
okay.
Is that your,
minus the TPA.
your understanding what Mr. Director Vunich said?
So we're looking at 340 then.
Yes, we'll credit
Okay.
whatever that TGA is. And actually the TGA
Okay.
went down in 2025 by 3%.
Okay, that's very fair. All right, so
So therefore, the motion that is on the floor, it sounds like you would amend then, and city attorney, just keep us honest here, amend to change that figure there, or do we also have to include in the motion the elimination of that development agreement.
Well, I think I understand what the clear direction is, but it is to make sure that in the legislation that comes forward, that it includes a payment of the, I'm sorry, what's the dollar amount?
$340,000.
$340,000 towards Main Street.
Okay. So when do we vote on it?
So is that your motion?
That's my motion. I'm requiring Latitude N38 to pay its share of Main Street in the amount of $340,000.
Okay, so if you're making an amendment, this is an amendment.
This
then.
is amendment.
Okay, so with that, then you do need a second, and that is Councilmember Albers. So we have the amendment on the floor. So now the conversation is specifically on the amendment piece of it. So I do have the list of names. I will call if that's something you wish to speak on, or you want to raise your hand and didn't raise before, I'll call on you again. So Councilmember Ottenberg, was that, do you want to speak on the amendment or?
Yeah, no, on another issue.
Okay, so then we'll come back to you afterwards. Albers, do you want to speak on the amendment? Or do you want to hold off till we come back after the
Come back.
amendment? Okay, Councilmember Edens, would that be on the amendment or?
Yes, because the dollar amount change that you're requiring, but during the discussion, one of the things that was indicated on the comparison chart was that this property is dedicating 40 feet of right of way. And other properties have, wasn't it 10 feet of right of way? So what is the incentive to trade additional land that they don't have to give us the easement to if they're going to pay more in cash? Because now they can just turn around and say, we want you to buy that extra. And you're just going to change hands again with money.
Okay.
That's what's happening in my mind. The incentive to donate extra isn't there. And that was an important component. The other thing is when I think about the area that this is in for development, this is a slated part of town center that we have envisioned in expansion. And there is a portion of that that is a responsibility of the city, period. And that's how we look at building a community, because that is a slated road that we know that is necessary for our community to prosper. This is not a neighborhood in a very, rural or remote area where the only thing that we would be building a road to would be the neighborhood. If it's a road to nowhere, that's the responsibility entirely of the developer. If it's a road that is necessary to the city also has a responsibility to step up to the plate and to try to reach common ground to make something happen. And I'm very concerned that we're going to kill a very good thing. I think where we're at now is significantly better than what came out of planning and zoning. We're closer to a cooperative agreement, but let's not make them pay more cash up front, lose more of an easement, and then have to turn around and pay that cash back to them to buy it at the price they deem fair, or a court, because that's what's going to happen.
Well, we tried to avoid the latter of that by doing the appraisal so that city council would have someone else's opinion other than the development entities or the city in terms of cost.
Okay, Councilmember Marshall, do you wish to speak to the amendment or come back later? Yes. Okay. And then Councilmember McCutcheon on the amendment? Well, does it pertain to what Councilmember Kranz was bringing up regarding the amount?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so maybe we'll come back to you. So anyone who I haven't called that wishes to speak on the amendment, this would be a good time now. Raise your hand. Councilmember Farr.
Yeah, maybe it's just a clarifying thing because I think I understand what Mr. Krantz is trying to do. I understand with what Ms. Edens is also talking about. So the cost to me of developing anything, it is a combination of the houses that you're developing and the infrastructure required for those houses and the ability to get there. And while a portion of this is very close to the Village Green, it's a road that we've talked about going together. I'm sure that there's still a significant amount of money that the city would be paying for to put this road through anyways. my understanding, and maybe this is where the clarity needs to come from, because the dollar amount is somewhat less material to me than making sure that we're staying consistent with how we approach these things. So we worked very hard to get an agreement together with McBride Homes. Many of us up here worked hard and supported that project. At the end of the day, that project went away because McBride Homes, from a business standpoint, couldn't make the numbers work for them. I would assume that they didn't want to have a couple $100,000 sitting in escrow for 10 years while they didn't build houses on vacant lots. That would be my guess. I think the same thing can be said in a situation here, just like our homeowners that come up and talk about having concerns about the number of properties or the types of properties that we're putting in here. When you buy a property in an area of a city that is designated as a high density area and you're sitting next to a vacant lot, you don't really get a lot of say what's going to go on that lot. So I'm kind of less concerned about some of the density issues or any of these things. And it's just more about applying the same information that we have to each of the developers consistently across the board. So that means we need to make some kind of an adjustment because we're dedicating 40 feet of easement versus 10 or whatever. The dollar amount is less important than the process in terms of making sure that we aren't losing a valuable addition to our city like we did when McBride pulled out, and repeating that process. But at the same time, that is the process. We have long-standing agreements with developers on how this works. I'm not sure if or why we are changing those processes. It seems pretty straightforward. So if the question is, with our amendment or this other thing, are we changing this process for this development, or is this an amount of money that we are talking about? Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I asked a question there. Does that make sense, Joe?
I think so, sir, but I will just tell you in regards to Main Street Crossing and Payne Family Homes, their dedication through their development site was the full 70 feet. So they had to dedicate enough of the parcel ground to accommodate the design of our Main Street through a residential section. So requesting 40 feet isn't necessarily out of the ordinary. It's just how
the land is. Right.
In terms of consistency, Mr. Cran's motion to just credit TGA is consistent with the development agreement we did with Payne Family Homes. Different in that, if you look at Wildwood Town Center, Coleman Properties project, we actually did a community improvement district, but obviously it was a very different type of development, and we were asking for a number of things, including a parking garage. So the circumstances with the development sometimes dictates how consistent or inconsistent we might be.
So then in this case, is this project more similar to the Payne Family Homes development or our SID district here in Town Center?
Much more, they're residential in nature. The density, again, remember, Payne Family Homes was roughly 30 acres with 100+ units on it. This is 7 acres with 53 on it. So we've given them an increase in density, and that's the incentive. Right now, they have 3 lots, all zone NU non-urban resident district. They have 3 home sites. We're basically saying you can develop another 50.
Okay. Then that's good.
All right. Anyone else that wishes to speak on the amendment that is on the floor? Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, I just had, I'm sorry, I had several comments, but they mostly reflect what Ms. Eden and Mr. Farmer said. I'm wondering if we have any exposure to legal action if we deny this. It doesn't seem like we have sufficient cause to kill the thing. Is that a reasonable question to ask, or?
I'd rather talk to you offline on that if that's okay.
Well, it's the vote. My vote is partly contingent on the answer.
Well, I will come and speak with you about that before the vote, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilmember Marshall.
Just a clarifying question. So we now have an amendment up that votes up or down. If it goes either way, whichever way it goes, then we're going to go back and talk about the agreement that was developed here. and the work that the staff has put in and the developers all put together. So we're just actually talking about the participation of the cost of the street. And that then will be added on because it can also be done in what we have in front of us as well. I mean, that's where we were. We're just going to pull that one out and make a decision on that. Am I understanding it the right way? The amendment is just going to pull out one of the many subjects that we had in here.
Correct.
That's a decision just on the figure that Councilmember Krantz proposed. So any other questions or comments? Otherwise, let's see if we can, we'll try to do this. Let's see, I'm wondering what the best vote would be.
Do you want me to restate the motion?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I have that the motion is to amend the original motion by including in the legislation a payment of $340,000 from Latitude 38. And I need to reword that, just let me know.
Okay, did you hear that? Or did you want to read it one more time and see if you can?
Sorry,
yeah.
okay. The motion is to amend the original motion by including in the legislation a payment of $340,000 from Latitude 38 North. Okay, I'll add that for the construction of Main Street.
Okay, seeing how it might be, do you have a question or comment before we take a vote?
I'm a guaranteed abstain from the vote on the amendment unless I can get clear in my head whether we also have included that the developer will pay $340,000 to actually pay for the construction of, I guess it's 30 extra feet of roadway where he only needs to pay for 10. I'm not even clear on that. But the big but is, are we going to include in this provision where we also admit in public, legally, above board, that we are going to, in good faith, entertain paying for that 30-foot of width that the property owner owns that they don't have to give us and that we want for our city as an asset, and that we're not going to ignore or discount the petitioner's legal and every right given to them as property owners to come back and charge us for that 30-foot, which probably will end up costing us $340,000 right back again. That's really the crux of it. We can't all want one thing. They need to pay because we want them to pay. And then at the same token say, no, we don't want to pay for it, even though they own it, which it sounded like the joint agreement, Mr. Vunich, was covering. So I would have thought the vote would be, do we vote for this amendment, or do we pretend like we haven't just spent half an hour talking about it because it was already covered in your agreement, which is going to go out the window if we vote on it. Tried to make that sound as simple as I could. It's getting convoluted.
Okay. Director Vunich, are you looking to respond to that, or you?
Well, again, in the draft conditions of attachment B, the department basically said establish 1/2 of a minimum 70-foot wide public right-of-way for the construction of Main Street as part of this site for a total of 34 feet of pavement area, concrete vertical curb and gutter, tree lawn area, and grass median, and 6-foot sidewalks on one side of the roadway. And it speaks to that the developer will donate no less than 30 feet and no more than 40 feet toward Main Street. And so again, in this particular instance, Mr. Kranz's motion is just reaffirming the condition and putting a cap on it, so to speak, and allowing the credit to the TGA assessment so as to offset some of the costs.
I'll admit, I didn't understand that. I just don't understand what it is about the original agreement that the city had struck up with the developer that's still requiring a surcharge of that amount of money that we want to add to this amendment.
Well, in the opinion of the department, the attorney representing the development entity said Latitude North 38 is amenable to section 4F, which is, for the most part, discusses the Main Street. But the language therein does not require them to build the road contemplated therein. So again, that statement led to the cooperation agreement, which was to try to assign costs, fairly assign costs between the development entity and the city. And the city, obviously, one of the costs the city could accommodate is the assessment, the TGA assessment and credit. And then we talked about the extraordinary land dedication, reimbursing them for what we typically call a 20-foot dedication to a 40-foot dedication.
So we're going to go get the bids and hire the contractor to build the road. And we manage it while the agreement calls for us to have figured out how to make it look like they were paying for it.
Well, in the opinion of the department, and I'll certainly defer to our Director of Public Works. As I mentioned, this project can't move forward on Etherton Road access alone because we prohibited as part of the draft conditions. They need Main Street, so they can't wait on the city. They can't wait on the city to pay for its section of Main Street.
I get that part, the
And they
timeline.
can't, we certainly don't have right of way or rights to Crestview Drive on the north side. So this project doesn't move forward without the construction, of at least a portion of Main Street. And we're saying now that cost, other than a TGA credit, falls on the development entities.
And just maybe to help clarify, and I think this is where Councilmember Kranz was talking about, is a prior development on the west side of Etherton Road was the Payne development known as Main Street Crossing. And I'm simplifying this, so if you want the details, Director Vunich will give you the details. When that development was built, that development actually surrounded both sides of Main Street. And so they, the builder at that time, were required to build out that section of Main Street. And so I think what it's coming down to is who is responsible for building the section of Main Street with regards to this development, and how much should they be required to pay to build that section of Main Street. Is that right?
Well said, sir.
Okay. So hopefully that helps provide the clarity. And so that's where there is, I think, a difference of opinion between what some members, I guess, on council or the city feel versus what the development entity believes should be paid towards Main Street. Councilmember Nyan.
I just have a question. So it looks to me that the appraised value of that additional footage is $42,298. Is that correct?
Yes,
So-
ma'am, that's correct.
So like Mercedes was saying, if they were to have us buy that back or whatever the case may be, so is it advantageous to take that from the 340? And do you know what I'm saying? So it all washes?
That's what was anticipated by the cooperation agreement, that the appraisal amount, which obviously the city felt was important for your consideration, be deducted from their cost as well. Their cost being the development entities.
So again, just to provide a little bit of clarification too with that, the city hired an appraiser, and the city's appraiser determined that that section was worth 42,000 approximately so. But I believe there's a difference in opinion of the petitioner. They feel it's worth what? Could you state how much?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the petitioner in this case believes that that extra 20-foot of easement is worth 105,000. We had our appraiser go out there and it was 42,298, if I believe. If I'm correct.
Did the petitioner have an appraisal done, or that's just their opinion?
I believe they did have an appraisal done, but that was provided. We didn't have like a exact report with it or whatnot, but it was provided from the petitioner.
So I think there's a difference of opinion of one party believing it's worth more, and so more credit should be applied, versus the city's opinion of what it's worth based on the appraisal that the city hired. So hopefully that will provide some clarification. Is that correct, or do I need to?
Very much so, but Mr. Mayor, all I would add to Ms. Diane's comment is, I believe Mr. Bosworth purchased the properties, the subject properties. And so what I believe he did is took in the purchase price cost per square foot for the properties and then multiplied that per square foot amount to that 40 foot of dedication over that 760 feet. So what the development entities are using is the real cost to obtain the ground.
All right, Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I'm totally confused because Crestview Drive is a private street. So unless the current homeowners want to change that to a public street, how can we possibly be talking about putting in a street, part of Main Street for this development? Because it's a private street. So how is that even possible?
Well, it is a private street that exists in a parcel of ground, but the 40-foot dedication would accommodate a lesser street, but a functional street. And as part of the cooperation agreement, as well as the draft conditions in attachment B, we are requiring the development entities to release all rights to the city for Crestview Drive. So the city now has 2/13, I believe. That would give us roughly 5/13 of Crestview Drive. We still have to negotiate with all the owners on the north side.
So where is this street? So there's going to be a temporary street next to what's currently Crestview?
That is being proposed by the Department of Planning. There is not a consensus on that. Obviously, it's odd, but I know of no other way to allow the development to proceed and have access to city streets.
I don't understand why I keep hearing, well, it's important for the village green, but you can get into the village green on the current section that we have and what we're going to be making with the village green. So I don't understand how this development in their other street is even important to the village green or the portion of Main Street that we already have. Yes, there may be a desire by this city to extend the Main Street all the way through at some point, but I don't think we're quite following the process that is typical that we provide if we allow them to put in a temporary street next to a private street. It doesn't sit right with me. I don't get that.
Well, first of all, Ms. McCutcheon, it wouldn't be a temporary street because, again, the developers agreed to pay from the back of curb onto their site to construct those improvements. That would be Main Street. So those would be Main Street improvements from back of curb into the project. We would not let them build a temporary street. Whatever street we get is basically the base of the street that we'll ultimately use for the full Main Street construction. So we're going to get an appropriate base, appropriate type X, type C, all those things that go into that street. That way, when we do obtain or ultimately obtain the rest of Crestview Drive and can build, and we're closer to that conclusion than we are now.
Okay, so I apologize, but please explain to me how we can let this development put in a street when the actual Crestview Drive is private. I don't understand how those two things go together. What? I understand the city owns part of that, but this development doesn't own part of Crestview Drive. And Crestview Drive up to where the city owns it is private.
Well,
Crestview Drive is so down the middle of the street, half of it's private and then the other part is public. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, maybe to clarify, I think you have to envision that with the dedication that would take place, there would be, I don't know if you have a visual, maybe I'm reading your mind there, but with the dedication, there would have to be a portion of Crestview, the northern half, that would remain private because it's not included in any of the discussions today. So it's almost like you will have two parallel roads, one that is going to be private, the north, which you do run into issues that, people have to understand that's a private portion of the road to serve those residents on the north. But the southern portion, and then remember that also there's that dedication, would be a wider piece and therefore would be finished out. So Director Vunich, you're showing that on the screen there.
Correct. So we have the 40-foot right-of-way request to latitude N38. We have the 40-foot right-of-way that the city can dedicate as part of Village Green. We have Crestview Drive, 25 feet, the parcel of ground, the width of it. That is not impacted. And then we show the remaining dedication that would have to come from the north side, which is 10 feet in width.
Based on this 10-foot.
Pardon, sir? Yes, we would have to control access to the private street. And so one approach would be a gate system. And giving the 8 property owners or so access to a keypad.
Have you gotten clarity on that or?
Well, in my mind, it's still two parallel streets.
Yes, and that is
One
correct.
private and one public.
That is correct. That's the way it would be at this point because of the way it is.
And honestly, I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, we have an amendment on the floor. Do we have another hand? Councilmember Dodwell, do you wish to speak? Okay. So I think we've entertained a number of questions here. We've got the amendment on the floor. It was repeated once before, but I'm happy to entertain that if anybody wishes. All right, Councilman McCutcheon would like you to reread that.
The motion is to amend the original motion, which was to draft legislation, by including in the legislation a payment of $340,000 from latitude 38 north toward the construction of Main Street.
So, seeing all the hands up, I think given that it's difficult to determine, and a voice vote probably would be challenging. Could you do a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edens,
No.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
No.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Preston,
No.
Councilmember Mabry,
No.
Councilmember Nyan,
No.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Rambo,
No.
Councilmember Crayons, Councilmember Albers.
All right, based on that, the amendment fails. So we are back to the original motion, but however, given the time that we are at, I'm going to ask, unless there's any objection, that we begin the regular meeting. So at this point right now, we'll what is a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. So motion to adjourn, and then we will come back to work session after the regular meeting. Okay, so a motion to adjourn until after the end of the regular meeting. We have that. Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember Preston is a second on that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that motion to adjourn passed. So at this point, it's 6:29. I will ask just for a couple of minutes if you need to take a moment and then get started with the regular meeting. After the regular meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening, and welcome to all for our regular city council meeting. Today is Monday, January 13th, and we will now begin with the roll call. So our city clerk, please go ahead.
Mayor Garitano,
Present.
Councilmember Roast, Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
Here.
Councilmember Galani, Councilmember Preston,
Here.
Councilmember Mabry,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Crayons,
Here.
Councilmember Albers.
Thank you. If you could all join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you. All right, approval, but the minutes will be part of the consent agenda, so we'll move into public participation here. So anyone that wishes to speak, if you can kindly fill out a speaker card and provide it to the city clerk, who is seated to the left of the podium, that'd be appreciated. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name and ward. To ensure that all those who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limit, and we'll let you know as we approach that time limit. If you have any questions for us, please mention them during your remarks and identify the official that you would like to respond. The official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so. The official may choose to respond to questions after tonight's meeting. Please be respectful to others making remarks. Interrupting others or using profane, abusive language are prohibited, and we want to thank you in advance for following these guidelines. All right, the first speaker, please.
The first speaker is Stu Williams.
Again, as a reminder, just state your name and ward number if you don't know your ward, your address. Thank you.
Stu Williams, I don't know my ward number. We're at 1600 Ridgeband Drive. So first off, please forgive me for my naivete. I don't know if this is the right time for this. This is picking up where we left off on December 2nd. This is addressing Vols Incorporated plan to allow single wastewater treatment plants at the northwest corner of Pond and Route 100. Is this the right time to raise these comments? Because
you're welcome to do so at this time, and you certainly can speak with the Department of Planning afterwards if you have any other follow-up questions, but go ahead.
Sure. So my wife spoke on December 2nd. Basically, our concern is that Vols Incorporated has requested a waiver for the city to, at their development, there are going to be 8 plots and about 31 acres. They have requested individual wastewater treatment systems on each of the proposed lots. So we would appreciate if the city would deny this waiver. The regulations are in place for a reason. They were put that way for safety and security and all those things. Our concern is that if this plan is approved and for whatever reason it fails, we would have serious issues because we're going to be right next door to it. As my wife stated last time on December 2nd, our daughter has special needs. She has a lot of health problems, and the last thing we need is anything to go wrong on our property there. Mr. Vunich stated last time that in the event of failure, there can be substantial problems. So our concern is that we want to avoid these problems. So we request that you would deny this waiver. That's that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and just for clarification, I believe this is still in the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, right, Director Vunich?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The Planning and Zoning Commission will take this particular matter up at its Tuesday, January 21st meeting.
Okay, so if you heard that, that's it, the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting later this month. Okay, well, you got a practice run. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
It's Edward Cohn.
Good evening. My name is Edward Cohn, Ward 3. I wish to speak tonight about the state or the status of retail and office developments in the downtown district. As you're all aware, we have not been as successful as Robert Duani had planned with our master plan. We're missing a couple elements. One is an ocean. Another is, major highways. And the city has created an ordinance back in 2006, ordinance 2348, that addresses public funding and assistance in a policy statement. They mentioned 4 particular items: neighborhood improvement district, transportation development districts, community improvement districts, and other public financing options allowable under Missouri state legislation. The Missouri Department of Legislation has created an economic development committee. And part of that legislation is Chapter 100. And there's some provisions here that aren't noted here. One of the hardships that most landowners and landowners, building owners, and developers face, they have bank loans. And when a tenant comes, and our tenant who is going to be coming to the city of Wildwood is not going to be a national tenant. When they look at our demographics, they're going to see that we really do not have enough rooftops, or translate that in bellies, and supports. Our prospective office tenant, retail tenant, is a mom and pop who would love to be in Wildwood, but typically is undercapitalized. Rents are extremely high. If a landlord were to lower the rents, that bank who has the loan would probably say, whoops, you're not given proper debt ratio coverage with that. What I am suggesting is the possibility under Chapter 100, there's a provision that would allow for the exemption for a developer, a building owner, not to have to pay sales tax on construction material or personal property. This type of assistance does not cost the city anything. There's no bond to be posted. The landlord, the developer pays for the product, but has the advantage of not paying sales tax. On a large project, that really can amount to a significant sum of money. That savings can then be passed on to that prospective tenant in form of, we can reduce your rent. We can give you free rent. You're a mom and pop with not a great credit history. Okay, now that we don't have to pay sales tax on the materials we need to build this out, we can give you a tenant improvement allowance and still be solvent. So I'd like for all of you to consider the possibility of that part of Chapter 100 that would allow for exemption on payment of sales tax on personal property, as well as construction material. And if you're in a really good mood, there's also provision for real estate tax abatement. Real estate tax abatement could be applied maybe for a short period of time, particularly during construction and prior to full occupancy. The impact to the city is minimal.
1 minute.
We're talking retail and office. Not many kids will be impacted by the schools. There is a possibility that the fire department might say, well, yeah, there could be a fire, but there are means to mitigate those costs to the fire department and other districts that would be affected when we talk about real estate tax abatement. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Tim Comer.
Tim Comer, 2460 Otherton Road, Ward 8. I'm going to speak on opposition to the TB development. And the more times that I come to the meetings, seems like you've all forgotten everything except for the road. Okay, who cares about the road? Have you been to our city park? Have you ever been denied a parking spot because there's not enough room to park? I've never. I've always been able to park at any park I've ever wanted. We don't need the road. Road would be nice, but we don't need the road. So tonight they spoke of, so the city has 2/13 of the road. Tony Bosworth has 2/13 of the road. What about the other 9/13 of the road? Have you spoke to any of those residents on the road? I highly doubt it. And I think you're doing them a disservice, just like you're doing me a disservice, that you don't believe that in my part, this will cause huge erosion problems to my land. And I know they'll put money in an escrow, but you know, once it's happened, it's too late. And the destruction is there. And it will happen. I haven't seen the way that you're going to stop the water. I do appreciate Joe Vunich and I guess TB agreeing to put the fence up for my privacy. That's great, but it's not going to stop my erosion problem. And there's lots of variables that come with putting in this street. You can talk to every police captain as far back as Captain Cruz that I've complained about the high speed driving on Etherton Road. And it's a serious, serious problem. And when you open up Crestview Drive, you're just inviting hundreds of more people to come in and speed. And there are no tickets written on Etherton Road. I've begged many city council members to come sit with me. It happens nonstop. It's just, it never ends. Etherton Road is a narrow road. And when Wildwood keeps building these narrow roads, after something like this big snowfall happens, they plowed Etherton and sure, a lane and a half maybe looked great. But when that school bus comes down the road and you're approaching the school bus, who's going to back up? I had to back up because the school bus couldn't back up that well and pull in somebody's driveway, but I had to. But these are things that are often overlooked until after the fact. And I believe that the city owes it to the residents of Wildwood to go talk to these other 9 people on Crestview Drive. I briefly spoke to several of them and they all would entertain the thought of you coming to buy their land and build the road. You don't need Tony. And I've never heard anybody ever come up here all the way back to the very first planning and zoning meeting that said, hey, I want to build this place. This is a great idea. This is a terrible idea. Building this is, I don't care if you're building with 57. It's not going to add that much to our economy. It's not going to turn town center into a thriving area that everybody wants to go to. It is what it is. And, you know, for the city to proceed to the next step, you need to look to businesses. And building this road is not it. You know, nobody wants it. I ran for city council last year and lost by about 160 votes. It was my first time. I'm going to run again this year. And I feel the main reason I ran this year is because I felt I owed it to everybody I talked to along the way. They're like, Tim, thanks for doing it. Thanks for going to the meetings. We don't want this. Nobody in Main Street wants this built. Nobody on Etherton Road wants it built. These are the people that this road will impact. So if he wants to build a private road with a gate, build it. I doubt the fire department will approve it. And that way you won't get the Etherton Road cut either. You know, and this isn't our number one builder, okay? There's a lot of problems with the way he rents now. I live right next to one of his rentals. They've never cut the leaves up. The only time he cut the leaves up is till recently so he could rent the house.
30 seconds.
And, you know, that's what this is going to be. You're going to have a problem. You're going to have to call him. And maybe you'll get the problem fixed. I don't think that's the way the city wants to run. And I can tell you that every constituent I talk to says, say no to this. Say no to this. So I believe that you were voted in by the voters of Wildwood, and you need to respect their ideas and their thoughts to this. And it's always been no. That's why it was denied twice by planning.
Are you almost finished?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Tom Kelp.
Tom Kelp, and I lived I'm in Ward 6 on Hankin Road here in Wildwood. And good evening to you, Honorable Mayor and council members and staff. I'm here I've understood that there is some political flack from the snow removal, and I am one of the contractors that does it, and I was one of the contractors that there was complaints on, and I am here to take full responsibility and apologize for the problems that we had, and they were numerous, and I won't take 5 minutes, trust me. But I do want to say that this was a snowstorm which we had on Friday, and I don't think you had any complaints. It was the 1.5 inches of sleet that was underneath of the snow that caused the problem. And I have run into this one other time in my life, and I think it was around 1987 or 8. And I worked 3 days straight for the Rockwood School District clearing their lots because they couldn't get through it. So we took loaders and scraped it off. And that is how we ended up at Brightleaf getting it off. Again, I apologize. I take full responsibility for it. One of the reasons is the sleet that was under it. Another of the reason was most of those people have snow blowers, and they blew all of the snow out into the street, which makes it a little more difficult. We did not get the second coat of salt down. And again, I take full responsibility. It's my fault. And it won't happen again. And we have put one more machine, and it will be a loader. We're using backhoe loaders with, but they're state highway 11-foot plows. They're heavy, and they will take it most of the time. But anyway, you put all of those things together, and it caused problems for a lot of you. And again, I apologize. I will tell you also that Scott and Rick do an incredible balancing act here. And this is what I talked to them about. We have the salt facility at our property, and we can unquestionably throw enough salt on these streets to take care of it. No doubt in my mind. But we've used approximately 1/2 of what we have. And we get another big storm and we've dumped a bunch of it, and we don't have enough to go for this next storm. We got big problems then, and we look like idiots. So I work with Wildwood. I work with Ellisville. I work with Manchester. I work with Winchester. I work with Baldwin. I work with Chesterfield. I work with Rolla. I work with St. Clair, Kirkwood. And I will tell you that we have 2 excellent city people there. Both of them, they're just incredibly good at what they do. And I want to give them credit for that. And again, I take responsibility for the mistakes that we've had here. And I will tell you that they aren't all problems. And I will tell you also, we've had to call the police because people come out, and my son, the guy yanked the door open on the backhoe, and we literally call the police, and most of the time there's drinking involved and screaming and cussing at him. Just Friday we called, he'd cussed every one of my crew out on it. So, and that's not your problem, but I want you to know that this is what we deal with on a semi-regular basis. But anyway, I got a couple of quick letters here, and I'm not going to read them, but this is from Rick Daly. He lives on Hollister Crossing, and he said he's 70 years old, and my operator stopped. He saw him and his wife. He's 70 and his wife is 65, and they were shoveling. They said, "Oh boy, he's going to fill my driveway up." He stopped and he said, "You want me to pull that out?" And obviously we don't, because we're on the city's payroll, so we don't clean everybody's driveway. But when we see somebody that needs it, we will. And he did. And they just wrote a real nice letter. You told him who his name was, Terry. And he has worked with me since he's 19 years old, and he's about 55 now. I've had people that have retired and still work as they're retired into their 80s. So I get employees and I keep them, and I like that. And then here's another one who said he didn't give he's in Dartmouth, and he just wanted to thank for the good job that we did. So, and I appreciate that. I am on call 24 hours a day. I sleep with my phone right next. I gave my phone number to Mr. Lee. I think Mr. Bunich will tell you that I'll do whatever he needs, and I know that the other ones that will too. I was not raised as a silver spoon child. I was raised on used to be Lindy Drive, and I think it's Lindy Lane. And it was a 26 by 28 foot house. My parents decided to put my little sister was near birth, so they decided to build on. My dad dug the foundation for the house by hand. And he said, you know what? Nobody should ever have to dig by hand again. So he bought a backhoe, and that's how we started 1960. So thank you. And if you have any questions and if you got any complaints, he's got my number and he can call me 24 hours a day. And I do answer. And Mr. Vunich, I think will recommend. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for your comments, and I'm sure the council would agree. We appreciate you coming here tonight, and we getting to see you and hear from you. And I do know that after you guys addressed the issue over at Brightleaf, it looked really good there.
I was there
So,
personally until I got home with about 1:45, I think. Yeah. I still run a machine. I'll do what I need to do.
well, thank you for your serving the city here and being
Thank
a
you
part
for
of
your
this city.
all
Thank
of
you.
You guys.
Okay, so that concludes, unless
No,
there are,
we
do we have
have
any
more
other speakers? We do? Okay.
Tony Bosworth.
Good evening. Tony Bosworth, TB Realty regarding Latitude North 38, 2442 Otherton Road. I appreciate everybody's comments during the work session this evening. Just wanted to address a couple things. If I could, and my partner is also going to address a few of these. One, as I've commented continuously, it's a public-private partnership as far as we treat it, especially as it relates to Crestview / future Main Street. Main Street is needed for the connection from east to west, as always has been in the master plan from its original draft back in 1996. We're creating a pathway to do that. We control about 58% of the ground area, 40 over 70 feet of the width. In doing so, Crestview Drive, everybody keeps saying TB Realty is responsible for Crestview Drive. Your city legal counsel can tell you that Crestview Drive is controlled under a joint and several agreement among 11 owners with 13 property benefactors who also by easement have additional rights. So although we can give up our rights, it doesn't take care of the rest of the property owners. The property on the north side will probably not be developed in my career. There have been 2 properties that have sold to individuals who are opening businesses that are allowed under non-urban zoning. And there are the existing owners who would like to do something. And 3 of those houses are rental houses. Excuse me, 2 of those houses are rental houses. We need, under the guise of public-private partnership, we have met with staff numerous times, almost monthly through the end of November. The last meeting, we had a conference call with our legal counsel, your legal counsel, and staff on the 26th of November. We need a couple things in this that are narrowed down to a couple of little tidy up items. One is we have been very clear since November of 2023 that we can do no less than 55 units. The cooperation agreement has 53. I don't know why that keeps going in there. It was explained to us by Mr. Vunich that that was the council's request, not the staff's recommendation. By doing the agreement as we are working out, with the city's ground for the remaining distance between our property and the current city hall, we are providing a means collectively between the city and the developer to connect Main Street between Otherton Road and Market Street. It's for the benefit of the community. It's for the benefit of the $3.8 million park that has no access from the west. There are things like the appraisal, which has some merit, doesn't have some merit, depending on who you are. In answer to your question, that is our actual value on the ground. And just as a matter of reference, the appraisal that you guys got for our ground is less than the ground you paid for in 2018. You paid 40 cents a foot more than what that appraisal was, just by the way, as a matter of reference, which oddly enough, they didn't use that as a reference, which is right next door. We want to cooperate. As far as the values of the construction, the budget that was created by Public Works in 2022 has a lot of holes in it. One, it has considerable amount of work, including the parking for the park, that you guys have put on a burden for future Main Street construction. You also changed your lighting and landscaping requirements since that budget was put together. You had lights every 75 feet in that budget. You've changed it to 150 feet, alternating side to side on both sides of the street. Similarly, with trees, you previously had trees every 25 feet. I believe it's 50 feet now. So those budget numbers are erroneous at best. In addition to our contribution, by our calculation, of $388,000 between the credits for the TGA, the $125,000 check that we are writing you as a gift.
30 seconds.
And the ground value, we have $235,000 out of that $500,000 that we are doing between the curb and our property. So I just wanted to point out those items, and during the work session, it would be kind of nice as a work session. It was also a work session to include us to address some of the questions that council may have. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other speaker cards?
William Levinson.
Evening. My name is William Levinson. I'm president of Benton Home Builders and a member of the Latitude N38 development team, 11605 Stutt Avenue, Suite 102, Creve Coeur, Missouri, 63141. I can understand why there's some confusion with the way this is all presented. I do this for a living, and I'm confused by some of the discussions and the way this has all been presented. I'm going to attempt to simplify it. The first point I'd like to make is our total contributions for the road total $560,000. We arrive at this figure by building from the curb back and all those improvements, lighting, sidewalks, curbs, etc. $125,000 payment. Even using the appraised number, which we don't necessarily agree with, but we're not going to get into that, using the appraised number of 42 and the TGAs of 158. So that arrives at 560. But that point aside, all of that is moot if we aren't at 55 homes. We cannot move forward, give all this ground, and build all this infrastructure for less than 55 homes. We, like Tony said, we really would like to have a public-private partnership here. We've been working with staff for going on 2 years. It's time to move it forward or not. It's your city. You guys have been elected and charged with guiding the direction of the city. The master plan calls out exactly what we're presenting is exactly in line with the master plan. Seems to me that this should move forward, but if not, we understand. And then we will move forward with the lesser project. We'll have access from Etherton Road only. We'll, per your codes, we will give you 20 foot of right of way. But that's all we can give with a smaller project. So I think I've said before, I understand development can be unsettling and can also achieve the city's goals. So with that, I'll leave you to make your choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
Brad Goss.
Thank you. I had hip surgery about a month ago, so it's a little slow getting up here. I apologize. My name is Brad Goss. I'm with Amundsen Davis. I represent Latitude N38, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to the council. And obviously, we followed the discussion in the work session very closely. I do think it can be very confusing. I understand a lot of the back and forth as we were sitting back there trying to follow what was happening. It's hard to follow because there's a lot of moving parts of this. I do think there are a couple of things that are fundamental to what we're trying to achieve. First of all, this meets your master plan. With all due respect to Mr. Comer, Main Street has been called for to be completed since the 90s. You went through a 3-year process of updating your master plan 2018 to 2021. And you adopted the expansion of Main Street and the connection. You adopted what we're proposing. You adopted changing the zoning. And that's why we proceed in this manner. So I respect what Mr. Cummer has to say. He's mistaken. The city made this decision with great deliberation. And we have covered the stormwater issue repeatedly. And unless you're going to change the laws of gravity, he's not going to get more stormwater. He's going to get less. And we've shown that in the plans, and your public works director has agreed with that. So I don't think those issues are well taken. As far as our costs and what we're contributing, what Mr. Levinson said is accurate. It's $560,000. That's the contribution that's being proposed. We went and what that consists of is the Main Street improvements from Baca Curve. It's $235,000. There's a $125,000 check that they're writing. It's direct payment. There's $158,000 in TGA credits, and then there's your number, $42,000 for the appraised value of the ground. We don't agree with that number, but for purposes of simply taking those numbers, which are real numbers, that's the contribution. It is not some lesser number. And so we believe the contribution we're making is reasonable and fair and part of this public-private partnership, and it accomplishes, most importantly, the city's goals of completing Main Street and moving town center ahead, which is an issue. And we know the businesses want it to happen. Gentleman was here earlier tonight recommending the Chapter 100, which, by the way, I think is a great idea. Anything we can do to help the businesses in Wildwood, and this project helps them, I think meets an important goal. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other speakers? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move forward. I don't have any announcements under mayor's announcements, but again, oh, yes, thank you actually for reminding me. So we have Jake Silverman here, who was part of the agenda for the work session. I think to accommodate his schedule, I'd like to see if we can have him come up to speak before the council regarding the legislative session there. So this would be a good time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I apologize for my tardiness, but I will give you a brief update of what's going on legislatively and what we had dealt with last year. So last year, for the second year in a row, we were in the budget. I think we had $350,000 set aside or allocated to the city for our erosion issues. Unfortunately, the governor for the second year in a row vetoed that appropriation. The good news out of this is we now have a new governor starting today, actually. So Governor Kehoe is going to be taking the reins, and I can't lie, I feel a lot more confident about this administration and what he'll do for local government and the issues that we face here in Wildwood. On top of that, I've already had conversations with the budget chair of the House. He understands our soon to be budget chair of the House. He understands what we're going through. Mr. Lee and I were gonna do a virtual meeting with him, but in all honesty, I think he just kind of understands, and I don't see it as much of an issue. I think he'll put our request in. Now, Mr. Lee and I have got to kind of figure out what that request is going to be for next session or this session. But I think at some point we'll come up with a good number, and whether that's a match from the city or not is I guess we'll find out soon enough. So on top of that, with regards to the erosion issue, I'm going to be reaching out to the Director of Department of Natural Resources, Kurt Schaefer. I have a good relationship with him, and I'm hoping to get an endorsement from him that he can send directly to the governor. Hopefully those type of things will move this forward, and this year we'll finally get across the finish line. We've been so close. I don't know what Governor Parson had an issue with in the past. Some say that there was, he was trying to allocate. He did $1.5 billion of vetoes last session, and then $555 million the year before. Some were saying that he was trying to hold on to the Kansas City Chiefs just in case Kansas was to make an offer. So that's where we're at with that. With regards to potential legislation, there's another sales tax exemption for food. That's from Senator Coleman. This is her second or third year trying to accomplish this. We've defeated it in the past, and I feel with the help of the Missouri Municipal League and all of the lobbyists that represent individual cities, I think we'll be just fine. Senate Bill 229 from Senator Ben Brown. This has caught my eye today. Requires approval or denial of development permits within 60 days of receipt. So when when somebody makes a request for a development project, the city has to get the denial within 60 days. If not, it's automatically approved. And then there is HJR 29. Which would basically make it that if there's a sales tax increase for a ballot initiative, it would have to be on a state general presidential election. So that would be after 2028. What the goal is to kind of bring more voters out in hopes, most likely, to defeat the sales tax. This was introduced by Representative Ann Kelly, who is a Republican and a pretty strong conservative. So. And then there's some potential legislation that we might want to support. House Bill 415 by Representative Bill Faulkner. Several years back, Representative Tony Lavasco was able to pass a bill that basically made it so home-based businesses were exempt from any sort of ordinance from the city. This completely repeals that. That would, give the city the appropriate mechanism to pass legislation that would, ensure that, noise, safety measures were all intact and up to the liking of the city. And then lastly, there's some legislation that I think I would want to watch or potentially fix. House Bill 209. It deals with drones, actually. Representative Van Schoik, he's had this legislation that would make it so municipalities would have to get permission from each individual homeowner when they would like to fly a drone. I know with some of our creek issues, we've taken, there's been pictures, using drones and things like that. So that would make it a little bit more burdensome to the city. I don't think we necessarily need to defeat the whole legislation. There's just some things that I would like to change. And then lastly, there's House Bill 665 by Representative Ben Keithley out of Chesterfield, which would require MoDOT to receive consent from municipalities before doing any sort of non-highway work. Right now, that's only limited to municipalities under 10,000 population. However, if the city was to want to get involved with that, I know Representative Keithley very well, and it's something that I believe he'd potentially amend.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for providing these updates. I'll see if there's any questions here. I will comment just briefly here on some of these bills here, because I think it's important that our residents are aware of what's happening in Jefferson City, and all too often there are bills that are being proposed that sometimes can affect people back home. And so I hope West News is listening to this, because, some of the bills like the exemption of food from sales tax, I think what Jeff City doesn't realize is how critical sales tax is to funding a city. So if they're proposing to cut a portion of that revenue, that is in essence defunding the city, and without us finding a replacement, which would have to force us to do a new tax, which I don't think anyone would want, there would be some serious cuts to services. And I really am perplexed about the approval of development permits within 60 days. I would suspect that would be economically devastating, because I don't think cities are going to want to rush through proposals without having the time to fully vet them So that is going to impact the construction, home loan industry, and just in essence, the moving forward with that. At least in Wildwood, we want to make sure we thoroughly vet things out carefully. So there's definitely a lot of things that we continue to keep an eye on, but it's so critical that the folks in Jeff City do not forget the impacts that they have on local cities. So I will see if anybody has any comments or questions. I really appreciate you presenting these. I think maybe what I'll ask is for our council to provide feedback on specific bills, whether these here or any others that we want to make sure that you put on your radar and work, and of course, continue to advocate for the watershed erosion. I know that 2 years, like you mentioned, we've been vetoed by the governor. So anything we can do, because watershed is a serious issue and we need all the help that we can get.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel a lot more confident with Governor Kehoe at the reins. So, yeah.
All right, Councilmember Edens and then Councilmember Dodd.
I'm not going to be too repetitive, but I want to just really second everything that the mayor just said. He shares my concerns. Senate Bill 229 is going to give me a stroke here because I am reading that when under development permits without the full language as beyond a departmental administrative function. So this is beyond permitting for a pool. This is permitting for commercial, for big residential. Dear God, I mean, you just sat through a discussion that has gone through planning and zoning, been appealed. We're trying to see if we can come to a consensus, and that's part of the democratic process. And to take that away from municipalities is just nuts to me. And it also doesn't give anybody time to affect changes that maybe they can, right? They would just be automatically denied because they don't have time to come back to the table. And so that really concerns me. And then I do have a question under H Bill 209 requiring the municipalities to seek consent. I think you've already pegged the reason why we're concerned over it, but are we considering, law enforcement, which we contract with, but they're technically a separate political subdivision under municipality jurisdiction? Because I don't want to prevent, a search and rescue operation because there is a house next to a park and somebody's lost on a trail and we're trying to track somebody down to get permission for a drone.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Law enforcement, the way I read it earlier was that law enforcement is exempt for things such as probable cause and their typical duties. So I think we're okay with that. I will say when Representative Van Schoik brought this forward, I expressed my concern with it for the sole fact of the watershed, the issue. I said, I was like, if we plan to fly a drone, I mean, we've got creeks that go miles and miles. I mean, to get consent from every single person is pretty drastic. And he understood that. I don't necessarily know if this bill will go extremely far, but you just never know.
Yeah, I don't want it to impede public safety measures, but I don't want to violate privacy more than necessary. It's a fine line to walk with technology changes. And then on 665, I'm chuckling because I'm sure I understand that this is related to Clarkson and yeah, you've kind of brought that up, but those are some odd changes that were made. But my concern is that we don't bog things down with red tape because a bad decision was made. And maybe, I don't need to know that they're going to be out there fixing a pothole. My residents just want the highway pothole fixed, right? So if there's a way to do that without creating more problems, that's where I'm at.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what? I'm Representative Keith Lee is a good friend of mine. I will say this is probably the first time I've ever seen him give authority to the municipalities. But he's a good friend of mine. And so and my roommate in Jefferson City. So I will definitely have plenty of conversations regarding this.
Councilmember Dodwell. Okay, great. Anyone else? Councilmember Farmer and Krantz and Marsh.
Yeah. So, Mr. Silverman, we've got a new state senator in Mr. Gregory, and we have a reelected state representative in Mr. Sparks. And I'm kind of curious because we do get a lot of these reports from you, and they are very informative. But I'm kind of curious what your take or relationship, I guess, would be with our two state reps, because we don't Mr. Gregory just got in there, so this is understandable. We don't see them very often here. And I'm a little nervous that our rep, Mr. Sparks, had somewhat of a fruitless journey to go for a Speaker of the House position. And while we would like to believe that everything is not sometimes personal, I think we're all pretty aware that sometimes it is. And so we've run into some issues before in getting funding for whatever the reason may be. But I would like to get your take on our two folks, since they don't come to see us very often.
Well, I'd like to say Senator Gregory is a good friend of mine, and so I'm fairly confident that he's brand new, so I'm pretty confident he'll make his journey to meet with the council. With regards to Representative Sparks, you're 100% right. The personalities in that building, their retribution probably will occur. The good thing is I have a great relationship with the Speaker, and that's who he was going against. Speaker Patterson's a good friend. I've already had conversations. I talked with him last week. I said, this was not something that the city had planned. The city wanted. We didn't even know about it, and so he completely understood. Matter of fact, I don't know if I put this in the report or not, but he did tell me that if when it came to the budget process, if our funding was not in the House budget bill, he'd be happy to hear from Representative Sparks to make an amendment to add funding, because he said, I would love to watch a fiscal hawk ask for more money, and he would support it completely. So I think we're on the up and up. I don't think that there's any problem. It's not the most ideal thing. When I saw that he was running for Speaker, my heart sank completely. But I have a great relationship with the Speaker, so I think we'll be just fine.
All right, was it Councilmember Marshall next, or?
Yeah, I just, probably a dumb question here, but this whole issue on the population size, my assumption is they're really concerned about those traffic reduction issues. 10,000 or less would cover Clarkson Valley, but doesn't cover Chesterfield at all. So is there a bigger reason for that? And I'm assuming that's what it's about, because everybody was making big issue about putting the highway traffic slowing issues in. And it seemed like Clarkson Valley did a lot more complaining about it, and Chesterfield didn't seem to be out in the public with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I talk to him on the daily, so I can absolutely ask. I don't know the reason behind it. I will say this: MoDOT has been at the they've been had a target on their back for a while now. I'm friends with a lot of these legislators on social media. The Senate President Pro Tem Cindy O'Laughlin made quite the comments about her issues with MoDOT. So right now the focal point is on them. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Councilmember Krantz.
I have a great relationship with the governor and his staff. He actually announced his staff. His staff that was going to help him with the transition, he announced a while ago, and they all ended up making it to his regular staff. I have a great relationship with him and his wife, and their staff as well. So I was very happy to see, him in office, and the people that are going to make up his administration. I'm sorry. I like to think so. I wish I would have made it happen with the former governor, but like I said earlier, I really do trust Governor Kehoe.
Well, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other hands up, and I guess at this point, if we'll get back to you, we'll get solicited from the council what priority items that we want to make sure you're advocating for our city.
Absolutely. And like I send out those weekly reports, and that number of bills will jump up. They don't stop proposing bills till March.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate your work
Thank
too
you.
with the Missouri Municipal League and St. Louis County League. All right. Moving on then, we're going to now move forward over into, we don't have any public hearings, into legislation, unfinished business. For the sake of efficiency, I'm going to ask if there are any objections for us to read in mass the bills that are in the unfinished section 2947, 2948, 2949, 2950, 2951, and 2952. Do we have any? And I believe, is there a request for 2952? Do you need something special done with that, an amendment, or? You can read it? Okay, so if there's no objection, Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yeah, I would like Bill 2947 pulled out from the all-inclusive reading.
okay, so we'll read that separately, 2947. Anyone else, anything? So all the bills that I noted except for Bill 2947. Please read the bills. Yeah, can we get a motion then to read bills 2948, 2949, 2950, 2951, and 2952, made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Go ahead. You can now read the bills.
Bill number 2948, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2730 by increasing the total authorization amount of the city consultant agreement with Intuition and Logic Incorporated to complete the design of a new shared use path on Old State Road, second reading. Bill number 2949, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2838 by increasing the total authorization amount of the city consultant agreement with George Butler Associates Incorporated, doing business as GBA, to complete the design of the Route 100 J-turn improvement project, second reading. Bill number 2950, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a cost share agreement with St. Louis County, Missouri, to install a high-friction surface treatment on sections of Old State Road between State Route 109 and Old Fairway Drive, second reading. Bill number 2951, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a second amendment to consultant services agreement with Rana Alanas CPA for accounting consultant services, second reading. Bill number 2952, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement with Tyler Technologies Incorporated for the licensing, maintenance, support, and cloud hosting of accounting software, second reading.
Okay, so Mr. Brown, do you have anything else that you wish to add to the information?
Thank you, Mayor Garitano. I have nothing additional, but of course, I'm available for any questions from the city council.
Okay, City Administrator Lee, anything else you wish to add?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to request tonight for Bill number Bill 2952 with Tyler Tech, the Tyler Tech agreement. Tonight, there is no change in the overall budgetary impact, and this is a budgeted expenditure for 2025. That being said, Tyler Tech's legal team got back to us with some revisions to the agreement, and that agreement is provided with a city administrator report that came. It's a memo from the city administrator that came with Bill 2952 as a secondary attachment. Now that it's had its second reading, the department would respectfully request that the exhibit that's provided within the report be adopted versus the original amendment, the original version. Sorry.
All right, so therefore, do we have any questions or comments from the council for the bills? So seeing that there is no discussion, then Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage.
I need a motion to amend if the council desires, Bill 2952.
Okay, so we need a motion then to amend Bill 2952 made by Councilmember Preston, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose or abstain? That motion passes. So at this point then now we can go ahead and call the roll.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper?
Yes.
Councilmember Preston?
Yes.
Councilmember Mabry?
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo?
Yes.
Councilmember Crayons? Councilmember Albers?
All right, those bills pass. Now we'll return back to Bill 2947 before the council for a second reading concerning wards 1 and 3. We have a motion for reading of the bill made by Councilmember Ottenberg and seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? We have one opposed. All right, at this point, Mr. Brown, do you have anything you wish to add regarding this? Huh? Oh, go ahead.
Bill number 2947, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city consultant agreement with HR Green Incorporated for construction engineering services for the Route 109 and Route BA Roundabout Improvement Project, second reading.
Thank you, Mayor Gaetano. I don't have anything additional to provide. This bill is for the construction engineering services that are necessary to construct the 109 BA South Improvement Project. As you may recall, that's a city-sponsored improvement project on the state route with MoDOT, and we did receive federal funding for the improvement project. This bill is necessary so that we can hire an engineering firm to do the construction engineering and administer the construction of the actual project. And I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has any questions or comments regarding that? Councilmember Ottenberg.
Just a question for Mr. Brown. What would be the, I know it's a little bit difficult to predict, but what would be the rough completion schedule for this project?
Well, the consultant had estimated, and that was part of their information they provided to us, was essentially a 6-month duration of construction. That was 6 months of straight work. So essentially starting in the spring and having it completed by fall of this year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2947.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Preston,
Yes.
Councilmember Mabry,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Crayons, Councilmember Albers, Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move on to new business. So similar to what we did before, if there is no objection, I'd like to request that we read in mass bills 2955, 2956, 2957, 2958, and 2959. Anyone opposed to reading these in mass? All right, seeing none, is there a motion for the first reading of these bills made by Councilmember Albers, seconded by Councilmember Hopper? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And anyone opposed or abstain? All right, Ms. Eldridge, please read the bills.
Bill number 2955, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending the FY 2025 municipal budget to adjust for salaries and compensation, first reading. Bill number 2956, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement with Olympus Capital Strategies LLC, doing business as Olympus Political Consulting LLC, for legislative consulting services, first reading. Bill number 2957, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, reauthorizing the adjustment of 3 legal lots of record, being lot 204 of Fox Creek Valley Plat 6 and tracts of land in sections 29 and 32, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, Plat Book 120, pages 4 and 5, located on the east and west sides of Chateau Lane, north of Model Realty Road, and to be hereafter known as 4715 and 4703 Chateau Lane, and 18815 Vixen Drive Boundary Adjustment Plat, first reading. Bill number 2958, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2908 by adopting building/swimming pool and spa, residential, existing building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, explosives, and property maintenance codes to include residential occupancy permits for all rental units, first reading. Bill number 2959, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an amended agreement with St. Louis County, Missouri, for code enforcement services relating to the building/swimming pool and spa, residential, existing building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, explosives, and property maintenance codes. First reading. That's all.
All right, thank you. Director Vunich, we'll have you come up this time first. Do you have anything that you wish to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, The first bill relates to a boundary adjustment that was originally approved by this body in August of 2024. There were some issues relating to one of the properties that was part of this. Those issues have been resolved, but the 120-day time window had passed, the reason for reapproval. And the other two relating to St. Louis County and the building codes. First and foremost was an error on the part of the department. It left out electrical in the title, but in the body of the bill, it was there. And then the second was St. Louis County respectfully requested we change reoccupancy to occupancy. And in all three, the department would respectfully request a second reading.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, bills 2957, 2958, and 2959, you're requesting a second reading?
Yes, it's unusual for the department to request three bills, but in all three of these cases, I would consider them either a reapproval or just minor changes to the text.
Okay, we'll come back to those after we just see if there's any questions or comments. You have Councilmember Eden.
I would like to add 2956 to the list primarily because that's a contract for legislative action. So this is a person already doing the work that needs to be compensated for it at this time.
Great, thank you very much for that. We'll come back to that. Councilmember Ottenberg. Okay, so yeah, let's come back with motions to do that, but I want to first address any questions under the first reading. Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, for Mr. Vunich, on Bill 2957, under the subdivision filing document, they obviously accidentally put down Ward 7 instead of 6.
My apologies.
No, it's not yours. It's that they did it, I'm sure.
It is Ward 6. It's off of obviously Fox Creek Road and Model Realty Road. We'll have that corrected. My apologies.
That's it.
Anyone else have anything? All right, so looks like we will have 4 of the 5 bills now read for a second time. So Councilmember Edens and Ottenberg, do you guys wish to make the motion for a second reading?
Motion, second.
Okay, now originally it was 2957, 2958, and 2959, but we could just, oh, well, actually.
Yeah, the motion includes 2956, correct?
Okay, so everyone clear, 2956, 2957, 2958, and 2959, your motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, so now we have these bills on the floor for a second reading, and Ms. Eldridge, then I guess at this point you can call the roll for final passage, or you have to read it. Go ahead, read it a second time.
Bill number 2956, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an agreement with Olympus Capital Strategies LLC, doing business as Olympus Political Consulting LLC for legislative consulting services, second reading. Bill number 2957, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, reauthorizing the adjustment of 3 legal lots of record, being lot 204 Fox Creek Valley Plat 6, in tracts of land in sections 29 and 32, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, Plat Book 120, pages 4 and 5, located on the east and west sides of Chateau Lane, north of Model Realty Road, and to be hereafter known as 4715 and 4703 Chateau Lane and 18815 Vixen Drive Boundary Adjustment Plat, second reading. Bill number 2958, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2908 by adopting building/swimming pool and spa residential, existing building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, explosives, and property maintenance codes to include residential occupancy permits for all rental units. Second reading. Bill number 2959, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an amended agreement with St. Louis County, Missouri for code enforcement services relating to the building/swimming pool and spa, residential, existing building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, explosives, and property maintenance codes. Second reading.
Now that these bills have been read, any questions or comments? Otherwise, all right, Ms. Eldridge, call the roll for final passage.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Preston.
Yes.
Councilmember Mabry.
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember Crayons, Councilmember Albers, Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. This bill's passed. Now we are moving on. Resolutions are part of the consent agenda. So we have the consent agenda before us. And if there's no objection with the items that are presented as part of the consent agenda, I'll look for a motion for approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval? Councilmember Nyan has made the motion and seconded by Councilmember Preston. All those in favor? Let me pause for a second. Do we have any questions or anything? Okay. Actually, I'll just make a comment. For the master plan update committee, you'll notice that wards 1, 3, and 6 are not listed. Those names are forthcoming. So we did get the 6 application already in, and we're getting 1 and 3. By the next meeting, we'll have those added in as well. So just want to make sure you're aware of that. All right. So with the motion, did you have a question?
A question. Since I am on the master plan committee, I'm going to abstain when that vote comes forward.
Okay, that's fair. All right then. Well, do you wish to abstain from the whole consent agenda, or are you fine?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I just, since I'm part of that, I don't feel like I should vote on that with me being part of it.
That is up to you. You can also vote for yourself if you'd like. It's completely up to you. So, all right, then seeing no other questions, motion is on the floor for the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain?
Abstain.
All right, 1 abstention. The consent agenda passes. Anything under miscellaneous? Councilmember Edens.
Yes, former council member Don Bartoni would like me to ask you to check with our trash supplier. Oh my goodness, trash contractor. There we go. There's the word. Found it. Okay. What he noticed is when he went on the app recently that he automatically had to grant permission for the app to share data. He didn't remember this occurring before, and there wasn't a way to opt out. So the questions that he has for the contractor is, what exactly is the data being shared? What is a reasonable privacy that I can expect? Is it necessary for the app to work? I would assume necessary would be address, confirmation that you've paid your bill and contact information, that kind of thing. Versus, is it sold to a third party for any marketing purposes? So if I could get that back in writing, that'd be great.
All right, I see the city administrator writing that, so he will follow up with you with that answer.
And I still need to follow up on the Prestwick crosswalk.
To confirm, is that Republic Services we're talking about when they're signing up for their app?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Anyone else have anything under miscellaneous? All right, well, seeing none, then I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn the main meeting, and then we'll continue back with the work session. So a motion to adjourn the main meeting made by Councilmember Dodwell, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, the meeting is adjourned. Let me ask, do you need a minute or two to stretch to, okay, so I see a nodding yes. Why don't we do about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that, just to give everyone a minute to stretch here, and then we'll continue back with the work. So it's time to reconvene for the continuation of the work session. So back to where we were before. Let's see over here, special Ward 5 meeting. No, no, just. Oh, okay. I was just checking. Okay, well, let's continue back to our work session. I'm sure everyone would like to get to the conclusion here. So for the night here. So let's continue. Director Vunich, where we left off, we had that vote for the amendment, which had failed. So back to now, I guess, the main motion and then where you wish to continue us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my apologies if you could not hear me. I'm trying to get as close to the microphone as I can. And Mr. Newberry has said that the volume is turned up as loud as it can. So my apologies. Okay, good. Mr. Mayor, again, the motion that is on the floor relates to authorization for the Department of Planning to prepare legislation consistent with Attachment B in its current draft form. Preparation of legislation requires the City Council to introduce the bill that is the legislation, and then approximately 1 month later, act on it finally. Suffice to say, if the City Council does authorize preparation of legislation, there will be ample time to review the content of the bill and any of the conditions associated with it. So again, if there are any questions, and I do apologize, there's a lot of moving components to this proposal, and certainly my intent was not to confuse anyone as we began the discussion back at the 5:30 hour.
Mr. Mayor, didn't you have a list of?
Yes, I do have that list and we can continue back to where we were earlier. Okay, so going back in the order now, Councilmember Otten, let me go through the names here. Ottenberg, Albers, Marshall, McCutcheon, and of course, we'll take on any other names that like to add to the list. So Councilmember Ottenberg.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Vunich, you had mentioned earlier in the evening that according to your review of the current development plans, that they adequately address for city code, and hopefully I'm saying this correctly, concerns over proper drainage of water, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because one of the concerns that was raised about this project in the beginning by people who will live close to or on the periphery of the project was the potential for flooding that would be caused by this project. And basically based on, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in your opinion, this plan adequately addresses those concerns. Would that be the correct way of saying it?
Other than the storm swales along the edge of Etherton Road, there are really no stormwater management facilities on any of the lots on this east side of Etherton Road, south of Crestview Drive. What is being proposed as part of the development is to create a system of stormwater improvements. And Vols Engineering showed by an exhibit that for the most part, almost the entirety of the runoff in this vicinity will be directed into the development and into those detention basins.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Next, the speaker I have is Councilmember Albers.
Yes, sir, Mr. Vunich. You talked briefly about escrow. Is there any difference in the escrow process with Latitude versus all the other developments that, been in discussion here tonight?
The developments over the course of time that have been authorized to defer construction until such time the city begins its project, those have all been what is called special escrows. So they're different than the subdivision escrow process in that the escrow form specifically calls out the improvement and the amount, the cost.
Okay. two other quick things. Several months back, I made a suggestion about a leasing office at this facility. And that came from several residents. I don't remember what was ever, if that was included or something they rejected.
The city council suggested that there be an on-site manager
Right.
that resides as part of the project. The department prepared in the draft conditions an allowance for a 54th unit, one more than currently authorized, if it was for the off-site manager. The development entities didn't accept that.
Okay. And the last thing, as we're looking forward to this, if it would go through, I would just explore what you can with this road and the gates. I just think that's going to turn out to be a cluster, you know? I mean, that's just a comment. I'm sorry to say, I just would like to really look at some different options than that. I just think that looks ugly, but to be honest with you.
And certainly it is not the optimum solution. Our Director of Public Works has cast some doubts about its functionality.
Right.
And certainly if we get to that point, we'll look at other options, certainly ones that can be proposed by the development entity, but not only that, the city council.
Thanks. That's all I got.
Next I have is Councilmember Marshall.
Sure. Joe, I think you guys did an outstanding job taking all of the stuff that everybody threw at you and go through the processes of kind of stepping it out. So I guess my confusion was I thought we were going to go through that process and kind of say, okay, you guys brought this up. Here's where we stand with it. But at this point, it appears that the number of units is a big issue still. And then how we get to the road and the cost of the road. I've tried to look through here. I know we have the charts and all that kind of stuff, but we've done this before with the road. We did right here for Main Street. So I'm just curious, we get different numbers from everybody. If some way, and I know I can't find it in a document where we're looking at it saying we have two choices. Here's exactly what the proposal was to start with. And then here's what it is. If we assume to purchase that amount in the middle based on appraisal, that's the option. And then that's kind of a yes or no, and it's 53 or 55, yes or no, but everything else, I think they've agreed to. Now, what we don't know is all the other stuff that might be in their legal agreements that will come back if we do go forward with legislation. That's, I think, where but I think at this point, those are the two areas that I think I'm still really confused at. And I'm perfectly fine voting one way or not having all that information either. So.
Well, regarding the number of units, back in the fall of last year, when the city council authorized the preparation of the draft attachment B, there was a discussion and the motion contained that there be no more than 53 units. So regardless of what the development entities have suggested, what was part of the department's original recommendation report to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're sticking with 53. That's council's direction. I think the closest thing we have to give us an idea about Main Street is the cooperation agreement that's been developed. It specifies responsibilities of all parties. It's intended to be that collective document. If there's something missing and we do want to proceed forward, the cooperation agreement can be amended because, again, that is separate from the motion before you tonight. It should be paid.
Mr. Mayor, is it okay if we go to that detail?
And let me find it here real quickly. My apologies. It should be starting on page 2. And it talks first item 3, right-of-way dedication and deeds. Item 4, Main Street contribution. Item 5, Main Street construction. Item 6, traffic generation assessment, TGA credit. So those 4 components.
Yeah.
Now, there is not in the cooperation agreement, after all of that is calculated, what is the development entity's responsibility in terms of their cost?
So in this agreement, it does show or positioning the purchase of that kind of no man's land, as well as then the TGA fund going over and then the remaining amount that they're obligated.
Yes.
So net, what's that total?
Well, if the TGA credit is $158,000 as presented in the cooperation agreement, rounding down, the contribution for the extraordinary land dedication for right-of-way purposes is $42,000. That gets us up to $202,000 that the city, in principle, is offering toward the Main Street connection.
So and I know we go back to your other where we're talking about expenses. So at this point, the city's credits are 202 if we use the appraisal option.
Yes, sir.
And then you have, and that's the 125. So the remaining amount that they would be responsible for.
Well, they, during public participation, noted the total cost is $560,000 to them. So obviously minus that 202, we're down to around $358,000. And I believe Mr. Cran's motion was almost that identical amount. Yep, about $360,000 is what they're claiming they would
Correct.
put toward Main Street construction.
And that's what Mr. Pence was trying to get to.
That's my understanding of the motion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of thought that was the whole, I think we were all talking the same thing, or at least trying to get to it a different way. But unless you go through and read all of those different pieces, you don't realize where the remaining amount is. And that's not really the city paying anything into it. City's putting in the appraisal price for the land. But other than that, those are all funds that we would traditionally do on any other subdivision.
Well, not necessarily, because again, remember the extraordinary land dedication for right of way, that is a payment, not a credit.
Correct.
So,
but not any different than we did for Main Street years ago.
well, again, in the case of Main Street Crossing, those were two credits, one immediate, so the development of Main Street Crossing could proceed. And the other is when the commercial outlots develop, we have committed via the signed agreement to credit, to send those TGA amounts to them, paying family home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Want to go through that one?
Sure. So originally at work session, the department identified a general cost of $500,000. That is from our assistant city engineer prepared the chart back when McBride Homes was interested in the properties on the north side of Crestview Drive. Tonight at public participation, the developer said the amount was $560,000. So $60,000 more than the calculation. Under the cooperation agreement, which would be applicable to either sum, the city is offering a credit to the traffic generation assessment fee of $158,000. Subtracting those two totals out, for the most part, bear with me, I think we're at about $342,000 under the $500,000 amount. And we're at $402,000 under the developer's $560,000 total amount. The payment of the $42,000 would ultimately drop the $500,000 amount to $300,000 and the other to the $360,000 amount. And so that's the difference. Their assessment, their estimate is $60,000 more. The motion that was discussed in the earlier work session roughly had it at about $350,000 of total cost that the developer would be responsible for.
Right, is that clear for everyone? Or I do have a couple of names here, but I'm gonna ask if there's any clarification on what Joe said right here. Otherwise, we'll come back to it if it's your turn to speak, but regarding the figures he just gave. Okay.
We're deferring the collection of a traffic generation assessment fee for each of the units, which totals in an estimate of $158,000. And then we're paying to the development entities $42,000 approximately for the extraordinary land dedication.
So that adds up to 200.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's a credit according to what Joe is. It's a credit. So now that you know the credit amount, go back to what is the cost of the construction. So Joe said there were two figures, right? For cost of construction, 560 or 500, depending on.
Yeah,
what you look at.
depending on who's making the assessment. Now, ours is obviously 2 years old. Theirs was provided to you tonight. We all know the cost of construction and materials for construction purposes has risen, so ours may be closer to that number as well. I don't know. All I'm saying is I had a reliable source, someone that used unit costs from recent bidding of public works projects or road projects, so I felt comfortable sticking with that number. I think what Mr. Kranz was attempting to do was to establish a baseline and move from there. Now, question becomes, their component is they're paying $360,000 to construct Main Street. I don't know if that $360,000 is just from curb into the development or includes the temporary road plus the curb into the development. I don't know.
Hey, the city attorney, maybe you can answer that. How is that written right now in the agreement?
It currently states the developer shall construct that portion of Main Street parallel to Crestview Drive and depicted on the development plan consistent with the standards and construction of public streets set forth in the approving ordinance and the city code currently in effect.
So as John Young just read it, that would be from back of curb into the development plus the temporary road or the road component.
That's how it currently reads. I do understand that there's been a request for an amendment to that provision by the developer.
And that's an important request, obviously. Mr. Young? I believe he has a red line version, so I apologize.
Asked for an amendment that states, and I'll read it and then I'll emphasize the new language. The developer shall construct that portion of Main Street parallel to Crestview Drive, new language, between the front of homes and back of street curbs, end of new language, and depicted on the development plan consistent with the standards for construction of public streets set forth in the approving ordinance and the city code currently in effect.
So Ms. Dodmal, my interpretation is the cost of from back of curb to into the development itself is the $360,000. And to assist in the construction of Main Street, that's the $125,000 that has been mentioned by the development entities as contributing to the city.
So Joe, so the way that it reads in the proposed amendment that they wish the council to consider it doesn't include the whole road. There's a whole section of road they're willing to only put 125 down for that.
Yeah,
Is that enough for the city to then do that?
it appears their contribution to, as Ms. McCutcheon called it, the temporary road is $125,000.
I feel that's a small number for what would be needed.
Surprisingly, and I apologize for this, I'm doing that a lot tonight. I don't think Mr. Brown and I would have asked Mr. Brown to do this, not him versus him, to me, is to calculate what that road purposes of connection at this stage would cost. I don't know that.
So we either have to wait and see what that number is, and if that number, how that aligns with the 125 that they were willing to pay for that, is that going to cover that section of road or not? Or is the city going to be responsible then for paying the difference? Am I hearing that?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, okay. So one option would be that we'd have to let them come up with that remaining amount, so we can have all the facts, all the information, but certainly open to seeing what other thoughts the council has. So I do have a couple of hands up. Councilmember Marshall, did you have everything covered? All right, Councilmember, I've got McCutcheon, Edens, and Krantz. So Councilmember McCutcheon and then Farmer. Go ahead.
Okay. They're wanting to put 53 homes on 7 acres. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're saying 53, they were saying 55 on 7 acres.
The recommended amount from city council is 53. You heard the development entity say 55 tonight.
Okay. So that's very high density. And I understand town center plan, master plan says in the town center area, we can have high density. High density is allowed. But it's up to council to decide what that density is going to be. Gotten comments from residents all across Wildwood over and over that our developments in town center are too dense. And they would prefer that the council back off of some of that density and make it less dense. Now, they're saying if they don't have their 55 lots, they can't do this project. They're not making enough money. Now, we just had discussion on the point at Brightleaf where they had to have X amount of dollars in order to move forward with the project. They decreased the number of houses that council felt was fair for the density in that area. And then you sat down with them and worked out a plan that it seems to be a better plan for many reasons, but also allowed them to go ahead, do the 30 houses and get what they need economically out of the development. So there is a way for us to do the same thing with this development so that it isn't so dense and that there's not as many houses. There's probably twice as many houses on half of the space than there is at the point of Brightleaf, both of which are in town center. So I know you worked really hard on that. We worked really hard on that. So it is doable. We can decrease the number of houses and still make it economically viable for the developer.
All right. Thank you for that. Then moving on, Councilmember Edens.
A question slash. Bueller? I broke the system. Okay, question slash comment, another comment, then probably a motion. So I just want to reiterate this because this is what I believe to be true. I'm saying this for the public and the council, and I need you to correct me if I'm wrong. So this developer is responsible for constructing 100% of the footage, road facing, road adjacent footage to the curb. The rest of the money that we're nickeling and diming about is what they're also contributing towards the road beyond the curb. So the street improvements, a lot that we care about, the curbing, the guttering, the sidewalk, the street lamps, the trees, that is already a cost that they are incurring, correct?
From backer curb into the development.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, my next comment is about the density. I'm probably not going to sink a ship here over 2 homes. I don't understand what the purpose is of having a master plan, having a TCA committee, reviewing it in depth, to then not follow the guidelines of an overarching development plan that we have set for the city that is continually reviewed. I don't know what is going to be good enough for this council. And I say that because we had a different council a few years ago, and TB Realty came to us with a proposal on this property for guess how many homes? 13. And there are people sitting here tonight that wouldn't vote for it because it was too many homes. Former council member Garitano and I were the only ones that voted in favor of that because we looked at that and said, be careful what you ask for. You could have apartments here. Wow, don't these houses look great? So my point is, where does the buck stop? If you want less, what is less? What's good enough? I actually don't know anymore. Is it 9 homes? Is it 1? Because when it was 13, it was still too many. But the zoning allows for the amount that's proposed. So, yes. Yep, different group of people. Some are still here.
Just for a point.
Yeah, still have the floor. So I'm just providing the background of if we work as a community to set the development guidelines, then let's try to stay within those guidelines. That doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater and let developers get away with murder, but we need to be consistent with the expectations that we set, because when people come to us in good faith, we need to try to stick to the plan that we have. Because most of my residents say, I want you to follow the master plan. And that's the area that's slated for high density. So, I'm just, we can't make everybody happy, but we can try to do the best that we can. And so what I'd like to do is go ahead and put a motion on the floor to proceed with legislation.
Can I just make just a point of information?
Yes.
Because I was around back then, it was a smaller footprint. So from comparison perspective, there was a parcel that was not included, that is today. So just for.
Yes, that's fair. That's fair.
Did you have a point of information for Councilmember Edens?
And the rest of the council.
Okay.
So it wasn't just the reason, the density was not just the reason that was voted down. It had to do with the style of what was going to be built there and a few other items. It wasn't solely density.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Edens. Councilmember Edens, you can continue.
Yeah, just a motion on the floor to proceed with legislation. And I believe the
Well, just a reminder, there is a motion still on the floor, just like before. There is a motion on the floor. City Attorney, do you want to clarify that again?
Yeah, currently
then I would like to call the motion. Call the question.
Okay, so there's a call the question. Do we need, now we need to get 2 seconds. So hang on, let's make sure. So
Then I'll withdraw the calling of the question. If people still have more questions, that's fine.
yeah, it's undebatable. So if someone calls the question.
Mayor Garitano, I'll withdraw it if people still have discussion.
Okay.
I'm not sure,
Thank you for that. All right, anything else that you wish at this point, or?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Kranz, and you're next.
Could you turn your mic on, please?
It gets down to density. The PRD adds more houses density to a small piece of property. It's like a double whammy. You're taking density, more density, and you put that on high density, topping it. And it makes no sense to be this dense. Lot sizes are small as 1,300 square feet. With the PRD, without the PRD, all the lot sizes are 4,000 square feet. This property is zoned for 4,000 square foot lots. Just the same as you find on Main Street Crossing subdivision, which is right next door to Latitude N38. Because of the PRD, which the city is granting and does not have to grant, Latitude N38 is allowed to build their 55 homes on 6.9 acres. And I'm going to tell you right now, there will not be adequate ground surface, soil to soak up the stormwater. At a location where there is a history of flooding, there is a history of flooding. And Joe, am I correct on that flooding?
Yes.
And we all have seen the pictures. And so I'm not going to support the excessive number of homes because of the flooding and the fact that we are doing a PRD on a small piece of property with a history of flooding. And if you do some researches on the issue of PRDs, 5 acres or less should never have a PRD. PRDs are used for large tracts of land. Just so what I like to do, if I could make a motion as well. And that motion would be to get rid of the PRDs and not deal with this flooding. It will be a problem in the future. We've had this before. This property is zoned as 4,000 square feet lots. This is current zoning designation. It's R6A. Check it out. And I would like to make a motion just to remove the PRD and make all the lot sizes of 4,000 square feet. And if that can't work, then adios. I'm making a motion for that.
All right, I did want to just get the city attorney to.
Okay.
Can I just ask for some,
just clarification, when you say get rid of, you mean for this project, not PRDs generally speaking, correct?
For this project, I think we ought to remove the PRD. That's something that we don't have to give these folks that want to
Okay.
build 57 houses.
Yeah, no, and that's fine, and that's fine. I, in terms of the current motion that is pending, that's not really an amendment. That's a dilatory motion. That would be a separate motion.
Okay.
That would be brought up at a different time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Farmer, you're next.
Yeah, so I'm going to try not to beat a dead horse here on the road. I just have a question on these numbers because, and I don't know if this is a question, Joe, for you or Rick, and I know it's going to be an estimate or whatever, but we've had in the last couple months some pretty substantial changes come back for resurfacing roads, not building new ones. I'm not a road expert, but I assume it's probably more expensive to build a new one than put something over the top of an old one. So what happens as we go through this process if this number comes back? And if we're talking about a public and private partnership or however we want to define that, what happens to the city? What happens to the developer if this road comes back and it's 25 or 50 or 200% more expensive than what we think it might be?
Well, the cost of their construction from back a curb into the development will increase unless they have a bid now or bids now that indicate that their cost they offered at public participation is in 2025 dollars. At the end of day, proportionately, the city would pay more.
So, I mean, when we did the Taylor Road thing, Rick, I don't know tell me if this number is right. I think it was came back like 24% more than what we thought, right? It was like 500 grand more, something like that. There was like a lot of other stuff involved in that than just like throwing some asphalt on it.
Councilman, I don't know if I could quote the exact figure, but certainly we have seen increases in construction costs, significant increases over the last couple of years. So that could be a factor, certainly.
So I mean, we're not talking about a couple $100,000. This is like several $1 million for sure to get this road done in some fashion. I personally don't even understand what we're talking about with a fake road and gates and everything else. Like, this is weird.
So Councilmember Farmer, maybe this might answer. The way the agreement is written right now, item number 5, if you guys are looking on bottom of page 2, going into 3, which would be page 31 of the PDF. It says the developer shall construct that portion of Main Street parallel to Crestview Drive and depicted on the development plan consistent with the standards for construction of public streets set forth in the approving ordinance and the city code currently in effect. So I want to get the city attorney to comment that, but the way I read that is they're responsible for the construction of the road. At this point, the way it is, they're getting the credit for basically a portion of it, but they would be responsible. I understand also that they wish to change that, but Director Vunich, confirm if, or correct me if what I've said is correct or.
Under the cooperation agreement, I believe, Mr. Young, and you are identifying it correctly.
Okay, so as it stands right now, the responsibility does not fall on the city for the construction of the road. The city provides a credit, and that is, I guess, the question about the credit is whether it's accurate or folks disagree or agree with it. But at this point, that would be something that is not in the hands of the city, the construction of the road.
John has a concerned look on his face.
No, I just want to make a clarification. The way the agreement was drafted and presented was that they would construct the portion of the road leading to their development. They would also pay $125,000 and receive a $42,000 credit to that $125,000 based upon the extra dedication.
So I guess my bigger worry is, because we've had this in a couple other places around town, if this number comes back and it is some astronomical number that none of us can figure out tonight, and therefore our developer friends decide they don't want to do this project, but they're halfway into it or whatever goes on, like, how are we as a city stuck with what is somewhat of a clearly very elaborate setup that we've got going on here with everything else?
From the department's read of the draft cooperation agreement, that particular component, item 5, doesn't set a number. It just says you construct it regardless of cost.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. So, like, I mean, the number thing, like, we can't really define a number because we don't have any idea how much it's going to cost. But what we're talking about is to simplify it as much as I guess I'm trying to do in my head, we want to try to keep the process the same as we've done in the past. In this document that we're working on, I guess it's 53 houses. Our developer partner here says they want 55. So I suppose that's a conversation that is had down the road. I guess I'm trying to understand, for myself and also maybe for some of my new colleagues up here that haven't been down this road before, like, this process is sort of confusing to get when you've done it a couple times. It's still confusing to me. So I'm trying to figure out, like, where in the process are we? If we go with our legislation this evening, as we're talking about, that's on the agreement that we sent, not this red line agreement. Okay. So then there's still, I would assume, a substantial amount of negotiation that needs to go on, because I don't think, based on what I've seen anyways, we're all in alignment on what is being agreed to in terms of the council and the developer. Am I right so far?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So, the process continues, I guess, but I think from a resident standpoint, they're going to want to know that we're not creating some new standard for developers. I'm a little unclear whether we're doing that or not based on previous things. I know we talk about, like, some special dedication or whatever it is, but like, that's just where the property is. It's not, we don't have any say on where it sits. It sits along a road. That's how it works. That's how all of these things work. So I guess, the residents don't want density. They do want density. We have agreements in place. We made them. So we can't just change stuff because we want. I'm trying to figure out where we're at in the process and how many more times we might have to have this conversation.
So right now, if say that there was a motion to draft legislation, that would still come back and be introduced for a first reading. At that point, it would just get its first reading, but after a second reading, that would be the point in which you would approve the agreement, but that would also potentially overturn the decision that was done by P&Z. That can be acted upon tonight. So in this case, we'd still have the first reading and second reading of the bill, but tonight, if we prepare legislation, it's not the last chance to say no to the development, but it is moving in a direction that they're mutually exclusive. Because there was a denial, it should have been a receipt and file. The appeal was open and it was closed based off the public hearing that we had. In this case, the agreement has been negotiated to a point, and that would come back, say there was a motion and it was approved tonight to move forward with with preparing legislation. That would come back at the next meeting or at the next concurrent meeting. We could have some negotiations if that's what the council wishes tonight. That would be something that would need to be included within the motion to say, hey, you need to work out X, Y, Z if there's a specific portion of it. But right now, the agreement that is written, the clean version from the city's perspective, that would be the version that would be included right now if there was just a clean motion to prepare legislation based off the cooperative agreement as presented tonight. If it was as presented tonight, but let's change this, this, and this, then we'd need to go and do a negotiation and bring that back during that first reading. John, is that good?
So I get that. Here's then my question. If we prepare legislation based on our agreement, which we already know the developer doesn't agree to, what is the point?
That was one of the things we wanted to bring up, is why we wanted to put the numbers in there. But the reason administratively we were a little tied was based off some motions that were made previously. The 53 units were originally proposed when conditions were supposed to be brought up. The council said move forward with what we have, but also add in the Main Street component. So we locked in pretty much the conditions that were set at that point. So the staff couldn't change the 53 component. That would be something that the council could do. The council tonight said, hey, we're going to go ahead and approve 55 units, but you have to pay for the street. That could be the agreement too. Tonight, it's more so getting consensus from the council and then having that worked into the cooperative agreement. We're providing the baseline of what we were able to compile over the last couple months. Development agreement, sorry.
But I mean, there is information that you guys have that we don't.
Yes, so it was very much recently provided to the city. But it's not much different other than the 55 units, and then just really more so not being in favor of the amount that was put down for the easement. They're wanting the 105 credit for it. Does that make sense? There's not like many changes to it. It's those two big contentious items.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of big items, but
yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I'll listen to some more of this conversation and keep thinking about this thing.
I have Councilmember Edens, Kranz, and Ottenberg.
I want to clarify something that was said earlier, and I'm going to ask you to correct me if I'm wrong, because this is my understanding. So the developer is not asking for a land use category change. A planned residential overlay district or a PRD, while it does enumerate the number of lots to be developed, because that's consistent with developing a site development plan, it is not actually increasing the density. My traditional understanding of a PRD is it's not changing the land use category at all in this case. It is changing the orientation of the lots for development, placement, setbacks, etc., but not changing the density. It's enumerating it, but it's not changing the density allowed under current land use categorization. Is that correct?
PRD is an overlay, so the underlying zoning district designation sets the density. The
Yes.
PRD cannot increase it more than what the underlying zoning district allows.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Kranz.
PRD, if you removed it from 6.9 acres and the lot sizes are 4,000 square feet, how many homes would that be?
It is going to decrease the number of allowable units, and I believe the development entities mentioned somewhere between 40 to 45 at the most.
So it would take 10 to 15 houses, units off that property.
Again, using the assessment from the development entities, yes.
Okay, so it does make a difference at PRD. But I like what Councilman Farmer suggested. And I want to rescind any motion I made here, but I would like to see further negotiations done here because we all have a lot of questions. It is a little confusing. I've been confused a couple times tonight. But I think the developers over here, they're getting a feeling of where we're going. So I think we need to negotiate, and I would recommend that.
Okay, so therefore it would be an amendment to postpone, motion to postpone with that direction for the department.
With your permission, Mr. Mayor, I think the fulcrum involved in this board is the city council going to authorize 55 units? Because at our negotiations, creating the cooperation agreement, and tonight you heard, without 55 units, this project is a no-go. Unless they've changed their mind back there, I think that's the discussion that needs to be had. Do you want the legislation prepared with 55 or 53? Well, I'm just saying, I think they need direction as much as we need direction.
Okay.
Because if we go through all this negotiation and they stay, 53 isn't enough, we've wasted everybody's time.
Go ahead, Councilmember Dodd. Well, I did have Councilmember Ottenberg and then Dodwell.
I guess my, it was just a basic comment. I think I agree with Councilmember Farmer that there just seems to be too many loose ends with the construction of the street that we need to get tied up before we can move forward with legislation. And it's just a brief comment, and I guess that's where I'm at. Just-
Well, certainly, if there's an opportunity for more negotiation, we can certainly sit back down and look at the 55 lot plan and bring our opinions to you, that being the Department of Public Works, the Department of Planning, and the Department of Administration.
So I think maybe not necessarily additional negotiation might be needed, but I think what we need is maybe in a clearer format, a table that indicates what is the city's position, for example, the number of lots that the city has indicated versus what is currently in the proposed document, the 53. Obviously, we know what they have indicated to you or provided to the city that they want a higher number. And then, listing out if those are the items there. But I also heard tonight that regarding the road, there is a small piece of information that maybe we could benefit from. And that would be, I believe, if I heard correctly, from the curb to the center of Crestview right there, what the value is. And then I would propose maybe if we can get even just a visual of a map where you can put the actual dollar figures of each section, maybe color code each section, so we know what the cost is for this piece versus this piece. And then, a little table that indicates maybe what is, the total, do basically the math formula that shows what is the proposed credit as written today. So that this way, the council sees it clearly, what we have before us versus what is the appraisal say. I think that's it. I just feel like there's a need for more information for the council, and I think everyone wants to make the right decision as much as possible. And we just need to get it maybe that way. So I don't know that there is a need for additional negotiation. It's more of just trying to get the facts. And I hate to do that because it prolongs it another meeting, but I don't know where else we can get that comfort level for everyone to have all the facts.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I've told many a council and mayors in the past, Once it gets built, there's no stepping back. So this is the time to figure it out.
So I've got a couple of hands up. So forgive me if I've gone out of order. Who do we have first? Councilmember Hopper?
I think the bottom line is, as far as all this time, they flat out said they want 55 houses. So I think as a council, we're gonna determine whether we're even gonna be making that type of adjustment, because if we're not, why are we doing any of it? We're not gonna do it. If they're saying they're not gonna move forward with it, we need to have a conversation, say, is 55 good? Are we okay? And if it is, then it's worth having some negotiation and seeing what we could do on everything else. But if we're gonna hold firm at 53, that sounds like none of the rest of it matters.
Well, and you know, the council did take a decision recently when the point at Brightleaf, council reduced the number from 34 to 30, and ultimately the developer ended up agreeing with the 30. So that's certainly a position the council can just stick with what it's got, and this is what it is, and it can either choose to accept or not. So, all right, Councilmember Dodwell.
While I understand that 2 or 3 houses sounds like a lot, if we do this and we take away 53 houses, each with 2 people in them, probably at a minimum, that's 150 residents who can walk into town center, spend their money in town center, who can use our facilities that we have throughout the city, who can help with our sales tax issues, et cetera. So while I understand everybody wants us all spread out, we designed town center to have dense implementations. And I don't understand why we keep kicking this back and forth as to what we have available in this space. This is a non-issue to me. I'm sorry that the residents across the street wish they still had 3 acres. I wished that St. Louis County didn't put in houses next to my house, but I didn't have a say-so in that either. So I think we have to look at the city as a whole, and where we get our income from comes from our residents who are buying things here, who want to be here, the restaurants that are closing because they don't have people. We need a population density here in the town center, and that's my perspective, and I will be voting for whatever gets brought forward at the next meeting. I don't understand why we have to delay this at this point, but if everybody would prefer to do that.
Councilmember Albers.
I also think we have to think long, hard about, will people pay the amount that these units are going to cost? I have serious concerns about that.
Councilmember Mabry, Lynn Farmer.
Thank you. What I heard spoken by developers' representatives was 55, you get your plan, you get your wide road, you get your main street. 53, you'd be driving up and down an alley. We'll revert back and get out of the agreement. I'd like to hear from the director whether I heard wrong, because I don't think I did.
Well, I think it was more bluntly said at one of our earlier negotiation sessions in the conference room on the second floor. If we don't get 55, there's really no reason to even do the cooperation agreement. The attorney representing the development entity said, no, let's see the development agreement, and they backed away. But you heard it tonight again.
So we still get the development, but we get 53 units and we get an alley, a dirt road to go back and forth, and can't use it for Main Street because they'll revert back to just what it takes to build their development, and Main Street can kiss goodbye. Is that succinctly what they said that I thought I heard?
Well, first and foremost, the decision on density lies with city council. Secondly, the property is zoned NU non-urban resident district right now. So there is another step in all of this that they don't seem to recognize, and that is you have the authority not to rezone it either. So you don't have to accept the R6A 4,000 square foot resident district. That's part of the proposal. That's not a gimme. You have the right to consider lesser districts or to deny.
I feel I do not have a right to do that. I have a feeling I have a right, and I was elected to honor and respect the master plan. And I'll intend to do that. There are going to be residents that are either NIMBYs or bananas and have their perfectly legitimate rights to think that way. But I don't have that privilege. I might have as a private property owner, but not as a council representative. My second question is, Mr. Vunich, can you help with explaining to everyone what the point of honor and the go to the mat with swords out is between the 55 and the 53? I'm thinking it's either the allowable width of the sidewalks will now be infringed from 3'6" to 3'2", or the roads have to be narrowed 4 inches to fit those extra 2 houses. What is it that we're fighting to the death on these 2 houses?
Well, for the most part, the original project that was submitted to the department for the first public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission had units well over 60. So as we have well over 60 in number, I believe it was
I remember
almost,
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the 55 actually is going on land that has been converted to public space just because we've kept reducing the number. So I don't think the infrastructure itself is going to be altered. It's just the amount of open space. Instead of this amount, there'll be 2 of the units on.
Mm-hmm. It's just all really helping me decide even more resolutely what I'll be doing. The final question, I promise. What is it that instead of just kicking the can down and trying to figure out ways not to do anything, what is the real downside from proceeding with the motion from 4 months ago to move this to the next step? Do we take away our right to not fight the 55 units and the 53, or can we fight that one another time once we've decided what the real worth, what the real difference in quality of life in Wildwood, 35,000 people, is to have 2 more or less packed in houses right in the place where they're supposed to be? Can we not make a motion? Can we vote on the motion that's before us for several months already, which is what I think is going on, without any more amendments and without any more deciding what we should approve when we haven't even read it the first time? Have we lost any of our rights? Right now, I think we have the upper hand because they walked out of the room. They already think it's a loser, and we can bring this back from the abyss pretty easily just by reviewing our own stances. I would definitely vote against the Planning and Zoning Committee's recommendation for rejection. That's the no-brainer. Is that all we're really voting on tonight, is to vote against the rejection proposal by the Planning and Zoning?
My understanding, please, Mr. Young, correct me, is that the city council requested a set of draft conditions. Those conditions contain a maximum number of units at 53. The motion on the floor is to allow that set of conditions to be prepared as legislation.
Right.
And what happens if we approve it for the draft conditions, including 53? My whole question's always been, does that take away the right forever for us to come back and say, now that we think of it, we really do want more common ground. We want the lots to be a couple square feet bigger. And we're going to go to the mat for 53 because we really don't want this development. What really is the worst downside in the world from us approving the plan tonight? to get to the next step.
Pardon me. I believe, Mr. Mayberry, if you were to move forward with the motion to prepare legislation, it would be introduced in February. And at that time, you could make amendments to the bill that's been introduced before final passage.
After the second reading.
After the,
So that-
please help me, John. This is your expertise.
So tonight is just the preparation of legislation. The intent would be to prepare the legislation as presented to you unless there's some further amendments to that legislation. At the time the legislation is presented at a regular council meeting, after the second reading, you are free to make amendments to that bill.
We could do that for the next 6 months after the second reading.
You could do that for a very long time. Yes, sir.
We could wear them out with logic. So we get a first reading in February and not the first and second reading. So we run that out to March. So we do the second reading in March. And then we say at the second reading, we want to make amendments in March, which we would discuss and do work sessions on.
That's always a possibility. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I know we've gone through and we'll try to stick with Robert's rules, but we've also allowed folks to speak more than twice or getting to that point for most of the council. So I will see if there's anything new that you wish to add. Otherwise, we do have the motion on the floor and kind of see where we are with that. So Councilmember Albers.
Just a new question to Mr. Young. We do have other options to get this land from Latitude if necessary, correct?
Are you referring to the right-of-way portion?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There's different options. Yes.
Okay. So we're not at their mercy, so to speak.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
Councilmember McCutcheon, I thought I saw your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Anything new?
So my question is, when is council going to be able to see this cooperative agreement that has been drawn up? When are we going to get that information? When are we going to see that document?
You have
It's
it in the
included.
packet.
Yeah.
It's in the packet, but it's not clear what, I mean, it's, to me, it's very confusing.
I
It's,
think simplify the cheat sheet, you know, that kind
Right.
of indicates.
yeah,
what the
it
key
just makes it
items.
very clear
Bullet it out.
what that agreement is. Very clear.
Councilmember Nine.
I just have a really quick question so that I understand this for now and going forward. When we were talking about removing the PRD, that I noticed in the audience, there was clapping and seemed to be to their advantage. They were shaking their head like, yeah, let's get rid of the PRD. What would that advantage? Why would they want that?
Because I believe they think the R6A zoning is already in place and it's not. Remove the PRD means you've got non-urban zone property unless the city council takes the first component of the two components that form this request and approve the change in zoning.
All right. So I think we've covered, so either, all right,
This is more of a procedural thing, I think, than
Yes.
anything. So I don't care about 53 houses or 55 houses. That's ridiculous. But I do think it's important that we really need to look into this road thing. We got to get some of this stuff figured out. So if we're going to take that opportunity to get that other information, my question, I guess, for you, Mr. Young, would be, is there anything that we can do tonight or that we should do tonight to try to kind of simplify where we're at? Because we sort of seem to be in this weird gray area.
Yeah, so I do want to make a comment on the road issue, in particular, how much they're constructing. For 2 months, the language that I first read you that we proposed has been in that agreement. I received a revision on Thursday of last week where the concept of only building to curb was raised to me in that document for the very first time. I was even getting revisions this morning on that agreement from them for the very first time after they've already provided comments and revisions, and we've accepted many of them. And a lot of them were just clarification, technical things. So that new deal term is a brand new deal term that we heard for the first time on Thursday. But I guess the question I would ask of the council, and just to give us some, guidance from a negotiation standpoint. Because when we're negotiating, believe we are acting at your direction and behest. In terms of the construction, and again, I don't know if I necessarily need a vote, but just a general consensus here of, when we're negotiating this, I'm presenting to you that they've got to build the road. And if they can either accept that or not. If you're saying, no, we're okay negotiating further with them, that's fine. And we're happy to do that. And I'll work out language and we'll put language together that clarifies that issue. But the presentation was, and our understanding up until last Thursday is that we were in agreement that they would be building that portion of the road. So if there's direction otherwise, we're happy to bring that forward and move forward. If there's direction that says no, hold your ground, we're fine with that too.
Anything else? Anything else, Councilmember Farmer? Otherwise, Councilmember Krantz.
No,
You have
I'm good.
I just want to know what their obligation is to pay for that section, 12 feet of concrete for Main Street? Something beyond the curve. He keeps talking about, oh, we did all this behind the curve. I was talking about the 12 feet that they're obligated to pay. We need that figure. I want to know what they have to pay on Main Street. That's all.
Mr. Krantz, I believe they said they will give a check to the city of $125,000.
But you said that was not enough.
I don't believe it to be enough for over almost 800 feet of frontage.
Yeah, I want your opinion, Joe. You've done the calculations, I know.
Well, I have an idea, but it's certainly not one I want to do where it's recorded and on YouTube.
So maybe he needs to come back.
This
to
is
that.
on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Well-
come back. I'll vote with you.
So anything else? Councilmember Marshall and then Preston.
So the agreement that we have, and again, I know they would pull this last minute stuff, but it's real clear. They would build the road out at their cost. I mean, I think that that's their problem to come back and negotiate it. I don't think we should have to work up costs what we would think. It's just build it to the standards. It's all in there. And I guess that my concern was, I think you got a great document here. They may not like it, but the more they look at it, they're going to realize it is a good document. So I just kind of think that the more we're willing to come back and give them numbers, they can say, no, we're not going to build it. And it's over. But it's real clear they would build the street out from the curb, not what they're telling us. They still have that responsibility from the curb back, but it's right there. So to me, there was a lot of good stuff in there. It's just that if we keep tweaking it, then again, keep negotiating with it. Just say, hey, this is what we have and go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that how much more negotiating could take place. I think we've gotten to a point, and then I think now it's more of like where the city stands versus where they stand, and whether the council is willing to accept any change. Otherwise, I think we reached that point. Councilmember Hopper.
Sorry, real quick, and I'm gonna kind of echo a little bit of what Mr. Marshall said too, of like, I think it literally is at a point where it has to just go to them like, the negotiation piece is kind of over. It's sort of like, where are the true sticking points that we need to figure out? Because we've spent a lot of time talking about this road, and if we push back on them, they may just be like, listen, we don't care about the road. We want 55 houses. Great. That's a conversation we can easily go have. But I feel like it's been said multiple times. I feel like we're just sitting here spinning our wheels about like, well, what about this? And what about this? Like, we don't really know. And not having to have an open, free negotiation with them, I feel like we're always kind of sticking ourselves in the foot.
Yep. All right, Councilmember Preston.
Just real quickly, I mean, why don't we just say, I mean, if we want to really have a serious negotiation, be like, fine, 55 homes and you guys build out the road and let's go. I mean, at that point, if there's going to be, well, we're not going to do anything with the road, or I mean, put the ball in their court and say, we're giving you what you want. Now give us what we want, clearly the road, and let's play ball. I don't know how else to put it, like simply put.
Well, I think as Director Vunich said, right, it's best we get this right as a city because can't go back.
Well, I'll say it again. Once it's built, there's no changing it.
Yeah, if it's, and again, without asking for a formal motion, but unless someone strenuously objects, we can come forward with a proposed agreement that has 55 lots, but they have to build the road. And maybe we can get more specificity as to what's being built. The intention was that it would be identified in a plan, and we were in general consensus of what that meant. But we can certainly give you some clarity of what exactly that means of what they're constructing.
I think,
Yeah.
Realistically, how much? Guess I'm just trying to figure out. Listen, that's what we want. If we could get it.
Well, I think the intent would be that we're going to draft the agreement and say this is what's being presented to the council. I mean, they are getting, to a certain extent, something they've asked for. So,
but again, that would be only if the council wishes to change it. Otherwise, the agreement is, as it's written right now, the way it is. And so I think that it is 53, and then the responsibility is they're drafted in the agreement is they are responsible for the road, but there is a credit based on the figures that Director Vunich mentioned earlier. So there is, there's that piece there, but I think.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All the rest of it. Yeah, I know some of that's just one conversation, but. We definitely.
Yeah, I think right now it's more of just giving you all of the information so that you're clear on everything. I don't believe we need to change the goalpost at this point. I think we already have a document. We certainly can be aware of where they have a disagreement that provided that feedback. And then there's like one last chance as a council to vote up or down on any changes. But otherwise, we've got a good agreement like Councilmember Marshall mentioned. I don't see us continuing to modify that.
I just think it's so important we don't put a dollar cost in them. Let them build it at their cost. We've experienced what happens on our building. So I just think the way it's written, I thought it's pretty good.
Okay, so I think it would be appropriate. We have had a lot of discussion on this, but it is an important topic that maybe at this point we just have a motion to postpone to the next council meeting for additional information as requested by the council, and also for the director to see if we can get a better figure on that approximate cost of that section of the road, which I believe is the curb to the center, because that's been a big item of discussion, understanding, what they're saying is they want to do up to the curb behind. The city needs a road from the curb to the center. So, city administrator, do you have something?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And this is a question for our Director of Public Works, but I did want to ask about just your traffic engineering sense on obviously, if they were willing to throw in on the real Main Street 55 units and they would build up to a certain percentage of that frontage, that's one thing, but just wanted to get your perspective on this 2-lane without median. Not necessarily if it's actually extending Main Street with just a 2-lane smaller road. I did want to kind of pick your brain a bit on any concerns in that front, because that could be another thing that is going to stop us dead in our track if we actually get out the door and this thing can't get built.
Well, thank you for asking. City Administrator Lee, I have expressed some concerns that I think were repeated at the dais tonight relative to the concept of the road. I'm not quite sure if it's a temporary road or a permanent road that's being proposed, quite frankly. I think there needs to be some engineering done to put it on paper so we can really see what is feasible, and if it would work, because I think the geometry is a bit challenging and there's some engineering issues to be tackled, frankly. So, that's my engineering perspective. I'd like to see all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. I'm not a planner, So I like to think things through and be comfortable that it's all going to fit together in advance. So I'm a little uncomfortable with what's being discussed, frankly. So I'd like to see a little bit of engineering done, which we have an engineering consultant on board. We have a plan that we've prepared. I think that could be done relatively easily just to see if it's feasible, because the width is what concerns me. The curb line doesn't match up, I don't believe, with our concept that we designed to put a 2-lane roadway in with where development. And I think we could determine that in relative short order, working with our consulting firm, frankly.
Rick, you can get that for the council, that information, because I think a lot of the discussion depends on that. And if there's, engineering challenges, then how do we even accomplish, that piece?
Well, I think there certainly could be an effort to provide a little more clarity in terms of that road. Absolutely.
Well, then I would suggest that the council get that information as well. Councilmember Farmer.
I'll make the motion to postpone so we can get whatever we're getting back. The engineering and all the other stuff.
Just going to second that motion. Did you hear that motion, Megan? Okay.
Was that one clear enough for you, Megan?
All right. So there's additional information. I think it's just the best thing to make sure everyone's confident in the decisions that they make here. All right. Motion on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose or abstain. Right, the motion passes. All right, moving on. B, Department of Planning and Parks. First item, Village Green Phase 1 change order for electric.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, with your permission, the department would respectfully request item 1 and 2 be postponed to the next meeting.
Okay, is there a motion for postponement of items 1 and 2? Without hesitation, Councilmember Hopper. Is there a second? Councilmember Farmer. So these two items will be postponed. Councilmember Dodwell, you have a question?
It is delaying it at this time. Now, saying that, that's the general contractor, but you can't work in the conditions we have right now. And the conditions we have right now are worse than the conditions we had at the end of December, which caused them not to work. And that's wet. And as I mentioned, we are revising the plan to simplify a couple of things. I need to get that to the committee, and that's at the end of January. So yes, it's going to delay it, but I think it's a delay that's worth having.
B1 and B2 on the agenda, the work session. Village Green and City Hall trash enclosure. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose or abstain. Motion passes. Next and last item under for action under Historic Preservation Commission. Second terms for commission's current youth members.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the Historic Preservation Commission is recommending that the 2 youth members who have served a single year in their terms be reappointed for an additional year. The 2 youth members have done an excellent job, have had good attendance, and I believe Ms. Diane or Mr. Rambo can comment as well.
Yeah. Motion by Councilmember
Mr. Marshall, I'm sorry.
Okay, is there a second on the motion? Is there a second? If not, Councilmember Preston. All right. Yes, motion to approve. So any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that motion passes. Anything on the miscellaneous? I think everyone's had a long night. I do just want to comment and thank everyone here at the city and the contractors. It was a big snowstorm, and I know that other than a few pockets, as Mr. Kelp mentioned before, everything else turned out pretty good. So appreciate everyone that was involved doing that work for the city here. So thanks for that. Motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Hopper, second by Councilmember Farmer. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.